All right, and we are getting started now. Hello to everybody in the chat. How are you getting on this Wednesday evening in Ireland? Probably afternoon if you're watching this over in the United States. And if you're watching this over in the United States, Jesus Christ, what are you doing? I hope you've got your eyes on what's going on in the Capitol right now. All right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Actually, Surplus, you probably know a little bit more about what's going on with this. We were talking a little bit about this before we went live. Do you want to maybe give some updates there as to what's happened for anybody who's checking this out and maybe doesn't know about what's happened? Because I wouldn't know that much, to be honest with you. But all I know is that people have stormed the Capitol.
Yes, indeed. Well, it is the great petty bourgeois uprising, and I am sure that everything's great out of here. No, but basically,
Full
this
communism.
is into the whole Donald Trump and the Republican Party have been pushing this whole the election was stolen and all that and blah blah blah. All that stuff doesn't matter too much. Liberals kind of overemphasize it, but the organized far right, in particular, Proud Boys, have since last night been doing some protests, gone into a few fistfights with cops. Great thing if both sides could lose. That's awesome.
Mutually assured destruction when.
Yeah,
let's make it happen.
Great. They can launch their own sort of rhetorical nukes.
In Minecraft.
But just this afternoon, the protesters have broken into the Capitol building, with the cops being quite a bit nicer than they would be towards previous protests they were this summer, such as with the George Floyd rebellions and all that, which is why they were able to get in. They are currently inside, roaming the halls. I don't think they've made it into like the chambers where there's actually congressmen and senators deliberating. So, yeah, it is quite a big protest at the moment.
Jeez, that's kind of bleak. Well, I mean, I suppose
Yeah.
I suppose what happened after the George Floyd situation, the uprising that happened there, that was kind of a left wing progressive thing generally. So yeah, I suppose this is just kind of the counterbalance to that. Unfortunate counterbalance.
Yeah, and of course, like the thing that the liberal commentary it's like is this is a coup, and I don't really think it gets to that level because I don't think they have much plan beyond get in and break up the certification of America's wonderfully dumb electoral college system. But like, I think this is going to be like a really big flashy thing, but as the cops kind of feel compelled to do more things, like I heard that they might have shot some tear gas into the rotunda area, which is kind of like the main meeting room of the not where the senators and representatives are, but sort of the entryway area.
Yeah.
That stuff will probably break up over time there.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see if this fizzles out like the other sort of popular movements and popular uprisings and stuff that happen. Let's see what happens in that regard. It will be interesting, yeah.
But it is kind of crazy.
It is really crazy, yeah. Kind of, well, at least for me anyway, it kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, I suppose that's it. The Democrats have seized the Senate? They've got the Senate now. Is that right?
Yep. And my state is now finally okay in the eyes of the liberal commentary because Georgia gave them the Senate.
Oh boy, thank goodness. Now we can have full communism. Everything's okay.
Oh yeah, this is why they had to do this, because like we were like 30 minutes away from doing this. Value form gone, like imperialism over.
Problem solved.
Going to decolonize the whole place with this.
Wow, yeah, that's some next level stuff, and I look forward to seeing that happen. No, it is interesting though. I mean, because when we talk about like fascism and stuff like that, I mean, we're really talking about that sort of overt and explicit dictatorship of I said capitalism by accident. Oh shit, that was
that's a real thing. Yeah.
Oh my god. Yeah, it is this sort of overt and explicit, open dictatorship of capital of the bourgeoisie. So let's see where this goes. If there's that sort of pressure, if there's that sort of rightward pressure, and there is this popular uprising,
Oh, sure.
because there is that sort of slow creep towards fascism that we see in the United States of America. Well, we
Absolutely.
basically since after the Second World War, it's basically going in that direction. So let's see how things develop. If anyone has any developments that they want to let us know about, just put them in the chat there. By the way, I'll do a quick shout out to the people in the chat there. Good to see you, comrades. I see New Wave Syndicate. I see Molotov's Sika, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. Matthew Calise, Socialist Swan, ZZZ, The Partisan, Comrade Roman, Ben Totes, Socialist Swan, again, skipping up all the shoutouts. Papi Chulo, Lee Flex, what else have we got here? Dominic, Comrade Leah, and okay, they're the big ones I see. I see a lot of messages from them. Harry's getting on, comrades. Good to see you again. Hope you guys are doing well on this Wednesday. And today we're going to be talking about a very interesting subject. We're going to be talking about world systems theory, or world systems analysis, according to some people. So I'm looking forward to learning a lot during this conversation, because I'll be honest, I don't know that much about it, which is a little bit embarrassing. I know the sort of basics ideas, everybody has a kind of idea of this idea of like, there's the core and there's the periphery, like first world, third world, these old kind of ideas. Now we sort of think of like core and periphery. We think of global north, global south, and so on and so forth. But I suppose it kind of adds like a third level to it when we talk about world systems theory, where you have like core, semi-periphery, and periphery. So it's kind of like three levels, and not to be confused with Mao's three worlds theory, which is a whole other thing. But we're not going to talk about that right now. So this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot, because today has been a little bit of a rough day for me. If people haven't noticed already, there's this lovely plant behind me, and I apologize, Surplus. You can't see the plant behind me. You can't see my video, but there's a big green plant behind me now. That's the thing. There's another one over my other shoulder. There's a little cup there. I've set up the room here. I'm getting started on a Socialist 101 course. It's like a new series of videos, basically going from like beginners to intermediate and to advanced, like everything, like assuming no prior knowledge, all the way up to like the modern communist revolutionary movements that are going on right now. So this is gonna be like a very thorough course, but broken down into short 5-minute, 6-minute, 7-minute videos. And each series is probably gonna have about 20 videos in it. It's probably gonna take me for about a year and a half to get through all of this, but anyway, we're going to keep doing that. And today was the day I did the first one, and I had the room all set up nicely, and had everything set up, and got everything recorded. Took me hours and hours and hours. Took me a full day. Then I go and look at the video, and the autofocus function on the camera wasn't working. It wasn't working properly. It was just like zooming in and zooming out, and blurring and unblurring, and just back and forth. So like when I would look at the little screen thing, so when I was taking, like if you're taking a photograph, you can look at it and you can see through. Everything looks fine. But after it was recorded, I realized that it was just the autofocus was messing up. It was zooming in here, zooming out there. It was just crazy. So when I went and looked at it afterwards, when I looked at it later on, just completely unusable. It's just gone. Can't do a single thing about it. I'm just gonna have to record it again. So that kind of sucks. So actually, I didn't say to Surplus. I had to grab myself a wee little drink for this conversation, because I was like, after this day, I just need to relax, take it easy, kick back, and have some fun, learn a little bit, and I hope everyone else will enjoy this as well, because shit, with all the stuff going on in the world burning, we're living through the plague. Sometimes we just need to kick back, relax, and talk communism.
Absolutely.
And on that note, Comrade Surplus, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody? Because you're going to be the one who's bringing us to communism this evening.
All right. Yeah. Here, I am Surplus Cornbread, mostly known from Twitter. I'm from Georgia in the U.S. Use he/him pronouns. I am with the Atlanta branch of the PSL, where we do stuff like teaching socialism and like serve the people type work.
Great.
We recently just did a clothing drive for homeless folks out there. And of course, getting involved in the streets. We haven't, of course, gone to anything that seizes a capital yet, but
any day now.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I think I saw somewhere in the chat there that they said that they've gotten into the White House now. So, yeah.
Uh, I haven't seen. I've been trying to follow things on Twitter. Haven't seen anything on the White House.
Yeah,
Because
I just saw
like
that in
these
the
guys are
chat. So
mostly pro-Trump, but they are in the Senate chamber.
they're just like beating the shit out of Trump. I don't know. Let's see how things
Oh
go.
yeah,
It could develop in a very strange direction. Maybe they feel betrayed.
there's a dude who is like, yeah, definitely. There's a dude who's got this like weird, I guess fur Viking type hat on, currently in the Senate, like cheering on his counter revolution, I guess. Anyway,
It's kind of weirdly. It's weirdly kind of based, to be honest.
yeah. There's a
It's
weird way
crazy.
in which I'm like, I kind of like this, but if it was just any other group, just like,
Anyone but the far right, or the center right, or
yeah,
the right at all, or even the center.
yeah,
Actually, I'd really like it if it was communists. That's
yeah. That, but you know, it is kind of, let's say, interesting to see Congress like see this stuff. They don't often get to see angry people quite up that close.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, let's see how things go. As I said, everybody in the chat, please let us know. Do give us a little update as things are unfolding, as things are happening. If there's blood, we want to hear about it right here. Just don't say anything that'll get us in trouble with our with the globalist overlords who are controlling and censoring all this. Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. Do you want to talk a little bit about your background, your political development, and all this kind of thing? You talked a little bit about a little bit about the organization, but maybe about your own personal development, and that'll help kind of situate things a little bit better for the comrades who are watching this.
Absolutely. So so for world systems theory in particular, I first learned about that with undergrad when or college, where political science was one of my degrees. Nice liberal bourgeois education into stuff. And then they from there, I wound up not really using that for any of my jobs afterwards. Wound up working in a call center for a while and all that. So that was the moment where you start going, oh, you know what? This Marx guy really got a lot of this stuff in the workplace down. So from there, that's where I've been developing politically for, I'd probably say past 5 or so years. Getting into a lot of the various theoretical works, like following discussions on stuff, following some of the better channels like yours, Paul.
Stop, come on.
And so my background on this is a little bit of university background on it, but mostly like reading this stuff myself and self-educating.
So this was introduced to you in university. Did you study like sociology, or did you study kind of what was? I know this is kind of multidisciplinary, isn't it? Like this is kind of covered in a few different topics, like whether that's geography or history, sociology, any of these kinds of things. It's kind of touched on in a few different fields. So how did you come across this theory or analysis?
Yeah, specifically, this is was first introduced to me in my international relations classes, because and this is going to be getting a little bit into some of our later discussion, but world systems theory is one of the major theories that they teach you as sort of the background for how to more systemically understand how international relations works, or how like our global systems work. And specifically, I think this is particularly important because, like, as people, we, in various ways, whether through just the culture or discussions with others, we do tend to have these sets of preconceived notions and ideas that are informing us whether or not we realize it. There's a nice John Maynard Keynes quote about this, where he talks about how people who consider themselves exempt from any intellectual influence are usually just following some defunct economist. But the same thing follows in other areas, such as political science or international relations. And so one thing I do hope that this discussion can do is sort of make people much more deliberate and aware about what they're really promoting, what they're really thinking about.
Oh, I love that so much. That's absolutely brilliant, because it's so important in this sort of Fukuyama kind of, end of history moment. We're beyond ideology. We're beyond all of that. Now it's just, everything's just common sense, and this is one of the great illusions. It's one of the great illusions of the capitalist imperialists that they've cast over the world, and increasingly spreading that further and further, and really trying to penetrate every single corner of this planet. So this is going to be really interesting to discuss, and hopefully people will be a little bit more conscious of these things, and how we think of other countries as well. I think there's going to be some really interesting topics addressed today, like, for example, how we measure progress when it comes to other countries. Do we sort of measure them by GDP growth and stuff like this, and we do all the time. We think of countries as successes or failures based on these metrics, on these goalposts that were set by our enemies, set by the neoliberals. So this is gonna be really interesting. It's gonna be really, really interesting, and I'm looking forward to jumping into this, comrades. If anybody has any questions in the chat, please do let us know pertaining to the subject of world systems theory, or the questions that are being asked. Just go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll take them down, and we'll get to them as we proceed through the conversation. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it, comrade, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
I'm ready.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's get started. So what is world systems theory, and how does an understanding of it improve our analysis as communists?
All right. So world systems theory at its basics, or world systems analysis, whichever you prefer to use, is about trying to understand events that occur in our world, not at the level of, say, individuals and individuals, or even necessarily states versus states, but at the level of how it all plays into this larger system. And a good way of illustrating this is, as I kind of hinted before, understanding what it can be contrasted with. In international relations theory, there's really sort of three main ones. World systems theory, of course, which we're going to go into in depth. And then two others I want to touch on briefly that may sound a little bit familiar to folks once they get explained. So one of them is realist theory. And this really sees the world as a collection of states which are effectively in anarchy with each other. But, not like our anarchist comrades would think, but more like what Thomas Hobbes described anarchy as, a war of all against all and all of that. And that the only way to really sort of bring everything together is to have one big Leviathan that runs everything. One of the most famous modern realist thinkers is Samuel Huntington, who particularly has this notion called clash of civilizations, which is that modern states are organizing themselves based upon these sort of cultural affinities with each other. So the West versus the Confucian, which is basically China, and the Islamic blocs, which Sam Huntington's kind of got some weird ideas on that. But this is kind of where a lot of realism brings you, because it doesn't have a real material analysis. It just has this idea that humans eternally have these us-them pressures against each other that are replicated in states, and this is all we see. And so for realists, in fact, a state is just a state. All states are going to act similarly. It's just a matter of what they have the power to do versus what others have the power to do. Um, and so you can sort of see this in some of the like even leftist positions of like all states are basically the same and you can just sort of equally throw them all out with no further consideration. Realism is all states are basically the same, so the one that you live in should be the one that wins.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So the next one that kind of contrasts with that is the liberal internationalists. And this is actually Francis Fukuyama's an example of one, but also like your Barack Obama's and Susan Rice's of the world. Like, imperialism is good as long as the UN approves. Yeah, so the whole idea of the liberal internationalists is that, okay, most states are the same. The realists are right about that, except that liberal democracies, because they have like the masses who are putting in input, can do better than others. In particular, they came up all the way back in with Immanuel Kant. These theories have centuries of background to them. This idea of democratic peace, where democracies don't fight each other, which some liberal internationalists keep on trying to resurrect by every time a democracy goes to war against another democracy, just redefining what democracy means, or what war means. So they've got that going for them, and their whole thing is that democracies are going to set up these international institutions which will create peace. And then once we have peace, we'll all have these same set of rules, and the world's going to be a great place after that. Everything will be great. And probably will look like the US, because that's sort of the dream of most liberal internationalists, is the US is the ideal.
Yep. It's so messed up. Like when you just take that apart, you know, like it's so, like I can't say it's like Eurocentric. Oh, I heard a little
it largely is.
Well, yeah, it largely is. There's a slight little echo coming through there. At least it sounds like it is to me. Are you using headphones or?
I am, but sometimes they do like the things bleed through, so I'm going to turn down my volume just a bit.
Oh yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like it's coming through the speaker and that's being fed back into the microphone or something like that. But yeah, cool. Okay, that's grand. I can't hear it anymore. And I can't remember what I was saying. So
well,
sorry.
no problem. So yeah, like the U.S. has kind of the liberal internationalist ideal. Only they want to sort of create these institutions that make everywhere into more or less the U.S. Some of the slightly more left-wing ones might view like Western Europe as a little bit more of a model, but it's ultimately not gigantic differences between them.
Yeah.
And neoliberalism kind of tends towards a liberal internationalist view, though you occasionally find some who are more realists, particularly on the right wing of neoliberalism. Then we got world systems theory. So, as I mentioned earlier, world systems theory is trying to analyze states within this broader system, and not just look at states. Instead, you want to look at states, you want to look at international institutions, you even want to look at internal institutions within countries. Even individuals can all play roles in this. And a lot of it comes down to this core versus periphery distinction. So to make that clear for everyone, what this really is talking about, yes, the core are generally rich states, but that's not what really defines them. The prime sort of definition of the core are the countries for whom the world system is sending its resources. So not just like physical things like metals or like agricultural goods, but also things like just labor time hours. This is where like people are going to tend to migrate for jobs, but also where uh, you're going to get cheap goods from other parts of the world. And a lot of this owes a lot to Marxism, in particular Lenin's views of imperialism.
Definitely, yeah. You can hear it. I mean, like we talk about the imperialist core all the time. So, I mean, it feeds in very, very naturally. I think if you have a solid understanding of imperialism already, this just adds more depth to it, I think.
Absolutely. In fact, I'd say that world systems theory in many ways tries to, whereas Lenin gives us like this beginning of imperialism, world systems theory is also trying to be a little bit more expansive about what happens in these peripheral areas, how these systems grow, and how you don't need like direct imperial control. Lenin gets a little bit into that, but he's still living in the period when empires are direct control by core nations of peripheral nations. And once you get into later thinkers, Emanuel Wallerstein is one of the main sort of progenitors of this theory. But you can also see it in folks like Walter Rodney with his How Europe Underdeveloped Africa.
Amazing book.
And very particularly Kwame Nkrumah, former president of Ghana, who wrote the book Neo-Colonialism, the Highest Stage of Imperialism. Definitely referencing Lenin, because I was a Marxist.
Nice.
And how the sort of fundamental way in which the core is able to extract from the periphery is this idea of unequal exchange. So the best sort of explanation I've seen of this unequal exchange is where in peripheral nations, you typically have high degrees of competition. You typically have very sort of low value added production. So things like your basic agricultural and mining production that is then sent to the core, and in return, finished goods are sent back. These are things which will have less competition in their producers, be more complex, have sort of more direct consumer level goods. And what this does is that it means that for every, say, 10 working hours that somebody's doing in a peripheral country, they're getting maybe like 1 hour of goods back for their exports. And this really immiserates these countries in a wide variety of ways. It involves like the enclosure of land to destroy any sort of self-sufficient ways of living or non-capitalist ways, as well as this proletarianization of more independent peasants, or even like pre-peasant societies, and bringing them into global markets for the benefit of the core. And it really functions on a spectrum. So how it sometimes talks about is you have the core, the periphery, and then the semi-periphery that's kind of between them. But really, that's just kind of terms of convenience, when it's really just core nations are nations which get the most unequal exchange. They get the most benefit out of it.
Yeah.
They have the most industries which can be more monopolized in world trade and have the most value added. Whereas peripheral nations are the ones which have to deal with the most of the market as it theoretically is supposed to work, which is that the market with high degrees of competition between producers, depressing prices, destroying almost any profit for the local people there, uh, in destroying any sort of uh, advancement of the development of the means of production.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the semi-periphery has some of those like higher value added things, but then a whole lot of things that aren't higher value added. The way I like just sort of visualizing this is if you've ever seen some of those pictures of Latin American countries where you've got like the favelas or the slums that are all these very like primitive low-end houses climbed together with a giant wall that separates them from like this modern resort.
Yeah, it's got like the pools, the tennis courts, everything.
Exactly.
I know the
Yeah,
picture you're
yeah.
talking about. I think that's in São Paulo in Brazil, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. Really great.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think it might be useful for us to just give some example countries from each of the categories, just so people can kind of have a better, deeper understanding of it? So when we talk about core, that's such and such country. We don't need to obviously go through every the many countries that exist,
Sure.
but maybe just one or two examples of each. I think could be useful. I'm not sure if you want to do that or if you want me to push forward with that. It's up to you. I don't mind.
Well, I can give some examples. So,
It'd be useful, I
uh,
think, just to help us, sort of situate it
yeah,
and frame
absolutely.
it within our own sort of mental landscapes.
Absolutely. So, of course, the United States is the sort of core country. It's the biggest, like most core that there is.
Mm.
But another example that even functions as a sort of core within a core is Germany, which
Yeah,
functions as this sort of place that sucks in a whole bunch of resources from the rest of Europe, mostly through its financial markets,
that's right.
but also through its high value exports. Uh,
Mm.
Semi-peripheral countries, a lot of the like classic ones are in Latin America. Uh, Brazil's a good example where they've developed some degree of industry, some degree of more advanced uh, economies, but still have desperate poverty all over the place and tons of very like primitive extraction going on within them.
Mm.
Uh, and then countries that are fully just periphery, uh, there's of course a lot. The majority of the world's population lives in the periphery, but some examples that come to mind are countries like much of Africa, so modern day Nigeria with its oil industry is a good example. Modern day Ethiopia has certainly become increasingly more integrated into the world system.
Mm.
Uh, and then, uh, yeah, there's, I'm also reading the chat. China, definitely a semi periphery country. Uh,
Mm.
And it's one of those countries, there are examples of countries advancing from the periphery to the core. And China's one that's advancing pretty quickly towards the core
Oh, I'm so
more
glad I
and
got that
more.
right. I
Oh,
said that
yeah.
in the chat and I was just like, oh shit. I hope that's true.
Yeah, yeah. And
Thank you.
uh, here I am just going to plug one of my resources on this book called China in the 21st Century Crisis by Ming-Ki Lee, written a few years ago, that really captures how this dynamic is working and a little bit of a spoiler, how it is really messing with the world system as it currently operates.
Mm. That sounds cool. Yeah, I definitely want to check that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Brilliant.
So this is in most cases, countries which attempt to go from periphery to core are blocked in a number of different ways. Back in the days of like old school imperialism, it was very easy to see.
Mm.
Like the British Empire didn't allow the vast majority of its colonies to make any industries for itself. I believe Ireland was in that situation.
Mm.
But certainly, places like India and any industries that did exist were destroyed primarily by the function of cheap British imports without any sort of tariff barriers, and by the seizure of resources and punitive taxation and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So that was like a very easy, naked, obvious way to see the core just imposing itself on the periphery. But as modern imperialism has sort of shifted from direct control to much more indirect methods of control, some of these methods have gotten much subtler. So the IMF is the great example for this.
Hmm.
Uh, the IMF functions on this model for how countries should advance that's called modernization theory. So, modernization theory is basically this idea that if you just free the markets and you just let sort of the economy open to global competition and with as little state interference as possible, you will become a rich country just like other rich countries who supposedly do that.
It's worked so well historically.
Oh,
I don't see what could go wrong.
and most world systems theorists would go, no, that's dumb, because if we remember back on like what marks a peripheral versus a core nation, peripheral nations do have these like very high competition markets, lots of these different groups around, but that all that does is it suppresses the ability to internally create profit and then use that profit to expand capital, meaning that they're stuck at this low level of means of production. And that's exactly what you see every time like countries do IMF things, and countries know this, but are often in various ways coerced into it, either through the fact that they need loans from Western banks, and the IMF is often the only way to get that, or because they have had coups done by the CIA, who then have dictators who accept more IMF loans. There's actually even some research I've heard of that shows that, oh yeah, countries which have had CIA-backed coups are much more likely to accept IMF loans.
No shit.
Yeah. Shock of all shocks. The CIA is bad, in case anyone didn't know that one.
Well, I, for one, am shocked and appalled.
How dare there be gambling happening in Rick's casino?
Oh, I can't believe that. You know, actually, I was just thinking.
Yeah.
I said that. I mean, this kind of gets back into like neocolonialism and stuff like that. I can't help but think of France. You know, you mentioned Germany as this core of the core, but France as well. When I think of like the EU, I think of like this kind of Franco-German kind of empire, really. And France literally has. Oh, sorry, I'm getting that echo again there. I'm not sure what that is there. I hope the comrades who are listening can't hear that. But okay, it's gone now. Good. Let me just check that. Hello. Okay, it's gone. Grand. Good stuff. Yep. So sorry about that. It's always a little bit awkward.
I think I accidentally hit up on my volume. So there we go.
That's what it was. I'm like depriving you of actually the ability to hear what I'm saying. Apologies for that. Yeah, but there's this thing that France does. Like France literally has these post-colonial taxes in 14 countries in Africa. Yes. 14 countries. Like if you look at like Algeria is an example of one of them, and it's really really fucked up. So they're keeping these countries impoverished. They basically said, well, look, we've developed your country. We've done all this great stuff. We built roads. We built infrastructure. We built this, that, and the other. And now that we're leaving, you're going to pay taxes to us. You're going to sort of repay the debt that you've accrued through our colonization of your country, you know, and that's still going on to this day. And the people in France, I don't blame like the people too much. Let's be clear. It's the ruling class, you know. It's the capitalist imperialists, you know, and the compradors, of course. These people are just extracting so much wealth from these 14 countries in Africa and all over the world, by the way. That's just like one example. The post-colonial taxes in Africa is just one example of it, but this is happening all over the world, and all of these imperialist powers are doing things exactly like this. But it's so fucked up, and a lot of people don't realize that's happening to this day. And this literally this
Oh yeah.
keeps these countries impoverished like permanently. So like what you said is so relevant. You talked about how it's not as though you can easily move from periphery to semi-periphery to core. No, there's barriers there, and the core countries put those barriers up and make it impossible, virtually impossible anyway, for
Yeah.
periphery countries to get to core status, and that's exactly what we see. Like, it'd be extremely difficult for Algeria to become a core country as a result of these post-colonial taxes that France basically is permanently imposing upon them, and yeah, so it's so fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely. And France is a fantastic example. Those taxes are certainly clear. Like one of their earliest examples was with Haiti, actually,
Mm,
uh, where the Haitians like fought a revolution. They kicked out the French, freed all the slaves, like the world's most successful slave revolt ever.
base
And
revolution.
then, yeah, and then much later, after issues of being cut off from world trade and uh, various sort of internal struggles, France comes back with a bunch of gunboats and says, "Hey, you owe us money for all those freed slaves that you had. Like, your own bodies belong to us, so we demand compensation."
Jesus fuck.
And that, yeah. And even with the post-colonial taxes, people can look up like the West African franc, a currency imposed by the French government on all of West Africa that forces those countries to put huge portions of their tax revenue in French banks, so that those French banks can then like loan that out and do that, but locks it away from any usage by that government.
Mm.
Uh, so they can get kind of subtle there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's intense.
But, and of course, this actually plays into interventions that happened. WikiLeaks had like some leaked emails with the what was then Hillary Clinton Secretary of State of the United States, who was talking with her advisors, who noted that one of the main reasons why France wanted to have this NATO push to kick out Gaddafi
Mm.
was because Gaddafi was going to form a gold-backed currency for African countries that was going to wreck the West African franc.
Mm. Jesus fuck.
So even in like these very like naked military interventions, it all comes back to a lot of this economic control.
Yeah.
And that's one of the really key insights of world systems theory. And it does help, as you're pointing out, with the whole point that it's like the French elite who are really the most beneficiaries, like the biggest beneficiaries of this are the French banks.
Mm.
This can show divides within even core countries. Though part of like what smart core countries do is they pay off some of their regular folks to sort of keep material concerns within the country at a low enough level where it doesn't end in like people storming the Capitol building and shooting guns.
Shout out to the comrades in the chat asking. How are you, comrade Romano? Good to see you.
Yep. So
Jesus. Yeah, it's so crazy that the US hasn't done that, isn't it? Isn't it just absolutely mental? I mean, like, this is like the quintessential bourgeois country. The founded on imperialism and colonialism and slavery and genocide and all these terrible things. You would think it would have nailed labor aristocracy by now, wouldn't you?
yeah, yep, and yet here we see that
And yet, here
the
we
U.S.
see.
So yeah,
Like
the United
the
States relies very much on its companies to do this for it.
yes, that's right. Yeah, and like you have these people who are kind of, I think you mentioned earlier on, they're kind of generally kind of, I don't want to say petty bourgeois, but they're kind of
Mhm.
somewhat well-to-do, maybe middle class and
Sure.
downwardly mobile people who are very
Hmm.
very fucking MAGA because they see what
Oh
they
yeah.
had before, they see what their parents had or something like that, and how things are getting worse and worse for them personally,
Hmm.
and then they end up storming the
Yeah.
Capitol and the White House, and there's gunshots fired and all kinds of crazy stuff's going on. You would think that the
Hmm.
US would have had a better, I don't know, grasp of the situation than it has.
And I think that like a person could try and uh, make a superstructural argument about how the United States uh, functions as this most capitalist of places, and though therefore it has to rely too much more on that. But I think that a lot of it actually does come down to some degree of like contingencies with leadership, that the United States has a bunch of kind of really old set in their ways and mentally declining leaders.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right.
Donald Trump's one of them. Hell, Nancy Pelosi. Uh,
Hmm.
and some of that is just, I suppose, nothing is fully a complete accident of history. Like, if you look deep enough, there's probably reasons that go on. But at least at the level of analysis I can do, a lot of it just comes down to we got set up with some guys who aren't even really good at running the system for their own benefit, which is a
That's so
good thing in the
depressing.
long run.
Oh my god, they're like, oh my god, they're in the fucking chair. They're like behind the scenes operating
Yeah.
her most horrific imperialistic death machine to have ever existed in the entire planet.
Yep.
And they can't even fucking do that right. Jesus
Yeah.
fucking Christ. Oh my god, I don't know. There's kind of a nihilistic pleasure in that
Yeah.
whole situation, isn't there? What the fuck, lads? They've got 800 military bases, more than
Oh
800
yeah.
military bases all over the
Well,
world, and they're struggling to hold on to shit as it is. Like, what the fuck? The other countries combined have
oh
about
yeah.
30 military bases, and they've got
Yeah.
their shit together. So what the fuck? No. Anyway, do
Yeah.
do better, United States. There's a liberal clap tweet there.
Or maybe not.
Or don't keep doing worse and worse until we inevitably fall to global communism. But well, the right wing might have us believe that that's around the corner. That's an imminent situation now that Joe Biden is in power. But well, one can hope, one can dream, I suppose. But
Oh yeah.
anyway, can I ask?
It's always fun. Yeah.
Can I ask on a? It's a little bit of a tangent. It's a little bit of a tangent.
Uh-huh.
I believe your organization has uh, a pretty pro anti-colonial take.
Yeah.
Is it okay if I ask you a little bit about that, because it's kind of a hot topic at the moment all over Twitter
Absolutely.
and everywhere.
Yeah.
Can I ask you about the organization's take on decolonization, the anti-colonial struggle, all this kind of stuff?
Yeah. Sure.
In the United States, I mean, like with the U.S.
Of
empire
course.
particularly.
Absolutely. Well, we do take like a line that does like derive from the uh, good traditional Leninist Stalin line, that there are nations within the United States who deserve like the right to uh, their own sort of.
Self-determination.
I want to say this precisely because there's a lot of ways in which uh, saying things wrong leads to bad implications.
Mm.
uh, so there are the native groups have the right to this land because it was directly stolen from them, and they have the right to, at minimum, under the current system, the least that the United States can do is respect even the treaties that it signed. It doesn't even do that.
Yeah.
And they deserve quite a lot more. They deserve like this way of retaining and expanding the like capacities and authority of their own traditional structures of governance and their own traditional ways of life. This isn't to say that we want to just like put them off into like some sort of Bantustan, like fucking apartheid South Africa or something. Instead, that this is their traditional land. They need to have a say over how it's run.
That's so important. Like, they need to have a say, like a choice. you know.
Exactly.
I think it's really important, and like I really appreciate that you situated it within the Leninist and Stalinist tradition. Like this is literally Marxism and the national question, like 101. It's
Yeah.
literally from Marxism and the national question. It's supporting the right to self-determination, and sometimes people will confuse that with actually supporting self-determination, like in every
Mhm.
single circumstance, when that's not actually what it is. That's not actually what the line is, you know. It's
Yeah.
supporting the right to it. You know, for example, people who say they're pro-choice are not saying that they're pro getting an abortion. They're saying we support the choice for people to do that, you know. And I think that's really important that we hammer home. That's what the Marxist-Leninist line is, you know.
Yeah.
It's giving people
Absolutely.
the choice and opening up that possibility and that option, you know. So, like, and I do know you do need to be, I suppose, a little bit careful when you're talking about these subjects, because the second you bring this up, people jump to very extreme conclusions, like, oh,
Mhm.
you want to balkanize
Right.
everything, and you know, you're going to just like
Yeah.
every inch of the land that's
Oh,
there
yes.
is going to be like a different country, and it's like, well, no, realistically, probably most of them will stay as they are, but you know, maybe there are some who will decide and who will choose not to, and who will want self-determination and to be their own like independent territories, or maybe there'll be some agreement where they'll have like autonomous regions within a larger structure. I mean, who knows? But I suppose it's about giving people the choice. Is that kind of the line that PSL would take, or am I just kind
Yeah.
of speculating a little too much there from the from Stalin's writing?
No, no, that's largely correct. And to even like expand a bit further on this does inherently include degrees of reparations, since after all, they have been stolen from and continue even to this day in many ways to be stolen from. Like the United States does have its own periphery, and much of it is in Native American reservations, in poorer areas of the Black South. Uh, One could argue there's even some areas of the White South that uh, white majority areas which encompass that, but like even that gets a little bit more complex. The key is that these are definitely all areas which are stolen from and imposed upon, and that uh, most particularly we need to, if we want to like really advance decolonization. Uh, I believe you had Dead Man Animations on here a little while back.
Oh, I fucking
Uh,
love Dead Man. He's great.
and fantastic. Love him too. And he's right that you have to destroy this idea of whiteness. And that's not
Yeah,
something that
I
is
agree.
in the liberal sense of, oh, well, I don't see
Renounce your
color,
whiteness.
so
Yeah,
therefore, yeah. So therefore, like, we don't have problems. It's that, no, I reject this whole idea I'm white because I'm not a
yeah.
racist.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, it's a bullshit ideology once you get down to it. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of it's a really strange thing, because like when I see people who self-identify as white, in the US and in other kind of imperialist, the cores of the cores, you might say,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a strange thing, because like Irish people, as an Irish person, like we we
Yeah.
kind of see them as like a different creature to us. Like, it's so
Yeah.
it seems rude, but like you won't hear like an Irish person refer to an American as an American, but it's always Yank. It's always this kind
Yep.
of, and it's I'm sorry, that might be kind of like rude or whatever like that. And I apologize to our
Nah, have at it.
comrades there. You know, I do apologize for that, but like it's always just the fucking Yanks are at this again, and here they go. And there is this
Yep.
kind of sense that, I don't know, there's kind of this sense of superiority, kind of, which seems to be tied to whiteness, the sense of self-identifying as white, um, which I suppose Irish people would kind of struggle with. I think it's gotten probably easier now as we've kind of assimilated to the core of the
Mhm.
core, as we talked about earlier on, through
Right.
membership to the European Union over the course of the 70s, 80s, 90s, up into the Celtic Tiger. Nowadays, we're very much assimilated within that system. You know, we're very much
Oh,
the
sure.
enablers for imperialism, which is
Hmm.
horrific. I hate it, but this is where we are. And yeah, so but there's this legacy of us being kind of othered, if we might say. You know, it's like we were discussing, like, you know, you can look at these like little pictures.
Exactly.
There was kind of like what we might call like a quasi racialization of of Irish people with fair skin, you might say. You know, regardless of skin color, you might say, because obviously there are
Mhm.
black Irish people and people and Irish people of all colors.
Sure.
But yeah, so it's kind of strange. That conversation with Deadman like really made me have to really think hard about this whole concept. And since that conversation, I've been looking at so many people in America who would sort of how can I say, they really uphold this, socialism with American characteristics thing, and
Hmm.
they'll center they'll center white Americans as quote the average American, the average American, and it's just they're white,
Oh,
and it's kind of strange. I saw a couple of tweets about it today, and I was gonna go off on a mad one about it, but I decided, you know what, no, today's already been funky enough with my camera, and things are
yeah.
I was kind of just having a bad day, so I didn't want to just like take that out on anyone else, But yeah,
Oh, yeah.
but it is strange. It is strange. Just this relation to whiteness as this kind of I suppose institutionalized form of colonialism. This kind of identity which enables supremacy and enables capitalist imperialism. And once you understand it in its systemic function, rather than just as
Mhm.
a descriptor, which
Yeah.
demarcates the tone of your skin, because that's never what it's really been about. Why not just say you have fair skin or light skin or whatever it might be? Whatever. Who cares? But whiteness as a
Yeah.
construct, as a construct, and it's a racial construct. Fuck that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely fuck that. Fuck it. Sorry,
Absolutely.
rants. There's the rants coming in. Sorry, that's
And
probably the
just
drink
to
having.
reinforce that just a little bit, that whole thing of if anybody is, if any American is offended by like some sort of derogatory term for American, like Yank or something, that person hasn't fully assimilated the idea of what it is to be a comrade, because they still want to identify too much with this Americanness, this whiteness, and all of that.
Yes. So
Like,
much. Yes. Oh my god. So much. Because like when I say yank, I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about
yeah,
like a working class person who's fucked over by the system. That's such a
yeah.
good point. And actually that illuminates so much with regard to this question of whiteness and socialism with American characteristics. Because there's so many
Mhm.
people who are like, well, why can't we just have socialism with American characteristics? Why can't? Because I'm really proud of my class. We've done all of these great labor strikes. We've done this. We've done that. It's great. I'm really proud of them. I feel a sense of patriotism. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, who do you feel that patriotism with? Do you feel that based on your nation, or do you feel that based on your class? And that's the ultimate
Mhm.
dividing line. Because when you get down to it and you have communists talking about left nationalism, they feel it based on their class. They're proud of the labor
Yeah.
struggles. And that's beautiful. That's great. I love it. I love it. Like proletarian nationalism, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But if it's a bourgeois nationalism and you're actually proud of your nation, remember, that
Yeah.
includes fucking Bill Gates. That
Right.
includes like fuck that. There's
Oh yeah.
there is no reason for a proletarian to uphold that shit, and that's ultimately that's what America is, and that's what it represents to everybody all over the world. Maybe you can't see that. Maybe it might be difficult to see that from certain
Mhm.
positions or sense of, or positionalities.
Yeah.
It might be tricky to see that because for so long in your life you've been sort of fed the narrative of patriotism and American number one and all these sorts of things, and you want to reclaim that, because it's quite a powerful narrative, I suppose, and it's quite mobilizing as well. It can be really kind of it can feel quite good and quite powerful and quite optimistic and quite positive to say to people, yes, I love my country and all these sorts of things. I love it, and then lots of people can feel very inspired by that. But when you think about it, like my country and what that actually means, um,
Mhm.
well, what is the country? What is that country? That country
Yeah.
is America. What is America? And once you start to
Yeah.
unravel that and
Exactly.
when you pull that apart, that's not a pretty thing, because again, like
Exactly.
you might be proud of what your class has done in America, and that's absolutely beautiful. But uh,
Hmm.
is it the nation? And that's kind of the key,
You're proud of your class, not your American class.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Your class who just happens to be in this geographical location,
Right. Mhm. And I think that's even a nice little segue into the world systems analysis again, because
Yes.
fundamentally,
On
like,
topic.
world systems is about breaking down this notion that we have to only view the world as this system of competing nation states, and therefore we identify with our own nation state. Uh-uh. We are seeing an
Based.
entire world system that is designed to promote the production of capital. And there are all these terrible consequences that come from that. And your nation, as like itself, is probably there to try and push that up. Now, there are exceptions. That's what left-wing nationalism is about. But that any sort of bourgeois nationalism, oh yeah, that's there to promote the world system more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love how we can situate this within a world system, because I think that's where a lot of comrades and a lot of people who are coming to the left maybe fall short. Excuse me.
Oh yeah.
I see this all the
Why
time.
they would.
You see this all the time with people who they're in their workplace, they're at work, and they are pissed off that their boss is making them do this, and they're working harder and they're getting the same rate, and their boss is sort of giving them a pat in the back. But you've made them like double the amount of money that you made the day before, and you're not getting any of that, And so there's a lot of people who would be kind of center lefts. They might call themselves, social democrats, democratic socialists, whatever it might be. And their problem with capitalism comes from kind of an individualistic perspective. They might, and they might expand that. They might expand that a little bit more towards like the workplaces, towards their sort of workplaces in their area. They might expand it. They might expand that to the national level. Excuse me, and that's okay. That's pretty good. It's a good start. But it doesn't get into, as you said, this world analysis, this analysis of imperialism. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Even if you deal with the problems of capitalist exploitation, even if you have like worker cooperatives in your area, they're still competing against each other, right? They're not actually going to solve the anarchy of production. They're not going to solve the boom bust cycles, the falling rate of profit. They're not going to solve the problems of global capitalism. This is the problems that are inherent to the capitalist system, right? So it's really important that we can actually expand it out and look at this on the global level. And I think that's where imperialism comes in. That's where world systems theory comes in. So I think it's really, really useful to expand it outwards. And it fans outwards very nicely, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it offers like the way to begin conceptualizing not just what we're opposing, but even what we might want to replace it with. And hence, proletarian internationalism. That the system is worldwide, so must therefore the struggle be. So we have to stand with, like, the workers of the world. They're the ones who gotta unite, right?
Yep. I think somebody important said that at some stage.
Probably. No, anyone has to read. Don't bother reading.
Can I ask? This is actually I want to push forward, because this was asked actually in the chat a little bit earlier on. One of the comrades, World to Win, fantastic comrades, asked, how does this connect to developmentalism? And we can bring that in, I think, into the next topic. How does this connect to developmentalism and environmentalism? And maybe what are sort of the differences between world systems theory and developmentalism and environmentalism, and sort of how they sort of relate to each other, if that makes sense. Can I just ask? I am conscious of the fact that we're 1 hour into it and we're on third question, 3 out of 7. So this always happens. We end up talking for ages. I've got about an hour left, if that's cool with you. So I think we might need to sort of push forward with these a little bit. Do you have a sort of time frame? Are you good to stick around for at least another hour?
Another hour will be just fine.
Cool. Okay, so we'll aim for another hour, and we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try and get through this in a fast manner without just overwhelming with fast talk.
Yeah, grand. So developmentalism and environmentalism, then, how does that relate? How do they relate to world systems theory?
Absolutely. So developmentalism, I talked earlier about this idea of modernization theory. There's an alternate theory that builds off of the core periphery analysis of world systems theory, and that is called developmentalism. This is where a nation decides that, okay, we are going to try and enter the core. How do we do that? And the basic thing that you understand once you understand what the core is that you have to develop value-added industries that can have degrees of protection so that they can produce the profit that will be necessary to produce more capital later on, and degrees of some sort of monopolization. That way you can build up your country. This was the theory that was primarily pushed during what was called the Bandung Conference back in the 60s. This was sort of the start of the Third World Movement, which was based along left-wing nationalist lines. There were a lot of talk about being anti-racist at the Bandung Conference, anti-imperialist, and pro-socialist, though not necessarily aligning itself with the Soviet Union, though the Soviet Union was pretty cool with the Bandung Conference, in contrast to the United States. But how you build up these industries is through direct government planning. And so this is how much of East Asia wound up developing, particularly like Japan, even Taiwan and South Korea. So even though these are capitalist nations, they can sort of follow many developmentalist guidelines. They had a lot of tight control over their banking systems, which they used to then directly collaborate with a small number of large companies in most of these cases to develop industry and catch up to the West.
Play by the rules,
was also
right? Play by the rules of the West, try like the West is the desirable, like you want to be like France.
Exactly.
You want to be like the US or Canada or Western Europe or something like that. And you should be. So work harder to become this,
And this is where like actually some degrees of revisionism can come in, because like this is where you sort of get so obsessed with the idea of advancing your means of production, becoming like a core country, that you lose sight of the overall class struggle.
Yes. Holy shit. Oh, fuck. You just dunked on Deng. Holy fuck. Deng Xiaoping destroyed. Excuse me, Deng Xiaoping. We should pronounce that correctly. But holy fuck.
Now, I will be a little bit fair to him. Like, I don't want to be like that, oh, this is just people who are simply being foolish, because there's reasons to do this. Like, of course, if you are in the situation where you are running a country and you're worried about the potential of invasion or outside aid intervention, like being able to go toe-to-toe with core nations becomes a much more
attractive
concern. Yeah. Now, one can go too far with that.
Yes, and I think we can all agree that Deng Xiaoping definitely went too far. Whatever you want to say about modern,
a capitalist rotor. Yep.
Yes, no fucking doubt about it. Jesus fuck. But yeah, whatever you want to say about Xi Jinping, that's probably a different conversation. But yeah. Too far down.
But this is where like it comes up that developmentalism. You can also see this in other places. For instance, Syria was a directly developmentalist state under the Ba'athist regime. And this also led to this sort of development leads necessarily to increasing class tensions, because the whole idea is that this is class collaborationist, aka we're not getting rid of the bourgeoisie, which is inherently a lie. You can't have class collaboration.
That's right, yeah.
So this does push into ultimately what can become increasingly bourgeois nationalism. This is like something that can undermine it. Now, it can have some good results even. Like, one can note that developmentalist countries do a lot better than, say, countries that are trying the modernization or neoliberalist type routes. And that's because, of course, they do. Planning works better.
Well, can I ask, what would be some differences between, let's say, a country that just takes like an all-out neoliberal approach and countries that might take like a developmentalist approach, and maybe some examples of that could be useful for people?
Yeah, so a great example is Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and then the post-Iraq world. Under Saddam Hussein's Iraq, not only oil, but most industries were nationalized. And because Saddam Hussein was trying to develop these higher level industries, education was very well funded and very highly pushed. So there's a lot of focus in these places on getting literacy up and then university degrees up and then having state-run enterprises, or at least enterprises that are nominally privately owned but really working under state plans. That's a lot of what South Korea and Japan did. To develop more and more advanced economic capacities. When Saddam Hussein was overthrown, what the United States immediately did was a crash course program into neoliberalism, and they sold off all of the government infrastructure. They, like, all the businesses except the oil industry, and then they sort of semi-privatized it years later, was sold off to various investors, chopped off, sent overseas, just like what happened with the fall of the Eastern Bloc. It caused massive unemployment, mass poverty. Over time, like, the physical infrastructure of the country has completely decayed because there's no money for reinvestment into it. This has caused like tons of protests within Iraq. And so when we see this difference, what we're seeing is not that Saddam Hussein was this wonderful communist. Of course not. He shot the communists. But instead, that he was running this state that was trying to advance Iraq into the core. And then it gets completely annihilated. Now, this all plays into environmentalism, because one of the things that happens in your early phases of industrialization is inherently you're going to start attacking the environment in various ways, from like your air pollution to your new sort of mining extractions to more commercial forms of agriculture. And in large part, this is part of the world system actually working for the core, because one of the ways that you make sure that profits stay high in the core is that the costs are externalized somewhere else. So if the costs of like cleaning up the rivers is something that, oh, those guys over in Thailand have to deal with, then that's something that your company doesn't have to deal with. And so therefore you get to keep more of the profits. So the environment can decline under both a neoliberal and a developmentalist. And this is another part of the limits of it, because at some point you've got to go, hey, we need to not just be focused on making more and more profit that we can redo into more industries, which we can get into the core with, because we're going to run out of fresh water eventually. Our cities are going to be too choked with pollution. And this can be the difference between a country that advances into the core because they begin externalizing a lot of their pollution, or a country that stays semi-periphery because they find that they can't do that. Actually, example of China on that. So I'm not sure if you've heard the big recycling news that comes.
Yeah, that's right. I heard that, yeah.
Yeah,
no more.
Plastic recycling has been bunk.
It's done. It's out.
Yep. And it turns out that was always just kind of a lie made up by the plastics industry, which of course it was. And what they would do is they would send this over to China, which like would take these bottles and they could actually do some recycling to it, but only at the cost of highly polluting industries. Well, as China's been advancing and as the working class has sort of made itself increasingly felt in China, they did decide, you know what, we can't keep doing this. And sorry, Western countries who were relying on this for PR purposes, we're done. So some other semi-periphery countries like the Philippines and Malaysia tried to take on some of it, but they really couldn't do much. But this is an example of where, as you're advancing, if you keep on like just letting the pollution rack up, that's going to begin eating in as you're going to need to redirect more of your resources to fighting it. So if you begin cleaning up industries, that's a sign of advancement either to the core or potentially going on a direction outside the world system, though no country has successfully really done that yet.
Mm. Outside the
Key
world
point being
system?
yet.
Yet. Okay, there's an interesting one to keep an
Yes.
eye on.
And the thing is that one thing that world system theory very much talks about is that the world system as it exists is a historical phenomenon. It's something that did not always exist and therefore will not always exist. And it has incorporated more and more portions of the world into it until the present, where one would probably argue that the entire world has been incorporated. Maybe you can make a case that there's a couple of regions which are mostly outside of it, like the DPRK or like Laos, maybe to an extent Cuba.
Yeah,
Though there are pressures on all those to join.
DPRK is probably the big one, I suppose. Yeah, it's hard to make the argument that they're like a periphery country, like in the classical sense of that. You know, that they're not like kind of, you know. I mean, I suppose with the Juche ideology, it's about self-reliance. You know, that's like the whole, like the core thing. Say what you want. Say
Absolutely.
it's like say it's revisionist, capitalist, whatever the fuck you want. Like it is very much focused on self-determination and self-reliance and all those sorts of things. So. Yeah, like how can we conceptualize is the DPRK like the best example of, I suppose, existing outside or potentially, let's say, potentially existing outside of this kind of system, you know, periphery, semi-periphery, and core.
Yeah, and I think that it probably is the closest. And it's not that there is nothing that's coming out of it. For instance, the DPRK does sell coal to China and a couple other countries that are willing to go around US sanctions. And they do have like some people who go to like China or Russia to work and then send back remittances to their families. So it's not 100% hermetically sealed off from the rest of the world system, but as a portion of like GDP, as a portion of overall production, and how much like the day-to-day life of the people there are dependent upon the world system, they're the most separated from it. So I'd say them, maybe a little bit with Eritrea too, but very few people talk about Eritrea.
That's right. Nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
Do you think it's communist state? Do you think they've achieved full communism?
You know, I don't think it's quite there, but at the same time, it's a little bit harder to say because it's cut off from the rest of the system, right?
Yeah. It's probably better than your standard bourgeois liberal democratic.
And of course, like, it still does have to operate on basically a siege mentality, and so that produces anomalies that produces like sort of pressures which aren't exactly the stateless, classless, moneyless society that we're really shooting for.
Yeah, absolutely. People kind of forget that long-term goal, which is it kind of happened to basically all of the socialist states, didn't it? All of the, especially the sort of I'm thinking like Molotov Pact, you know. Eastern Europe kind of countries. I mean, it was very kind of. We'll deal with the stateless, classless, moneylessness later. That's like there was kind of a sense of like that's inevitable. That's going to happen anyway. So we can just kind of relax and take it easy and take our foot off the accelerator, take our foot off the gas, just chill.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when that happens externally, then yeah, we'll probably do that too. No big deal. But
and that was and you know, the thing is that was the entire theory that like the Bolsheviks and Lenin was on at the beginning, because this is where you can get into like some of the big Marxist debates on the relative importance of developing means of production versus like your social class structures and all of that. That oh hey, the most advanced nations of the world haven't like gone socialist here, so we just kind of have to hold on, because if we go socialist, there's just no confidence that we can hold out and make it.
Yeah.
And, well, I can only hope that we get our act together a little bit faster, given global warming.
Yeah, we need to fucking.
Yeah.
There's a literal
A little bit of
fire.
acceleration would be nice.
Yes, there's the literal fire lit under our arses right now, and it's time. It's time for socialism. Please, fuck. Jesus. Fuck. God. Socialism, please. Socialism 2021. It's time.
Right.
At least 2030. By 2030, I want to see. To everybody in the chat who's watching right now, just let your heads of state know that Paul's asking for socialism by 2030. Maybe just put in a good word for me. Let them know it's Paul Marin YouTube channel, tiny YouTube channel. Then maybe they'll be pressured into it. Oh shit, it's Paul. Paul's asking for socialism.
Right.
I guess we got to do it. So yeah, okay, maybe that'll help. Let them know anyway, and hopefully, I hope to see global socialism, at least global socialism by 2030, and then maybe we'll do communism in like the 2040s, something like that. Actually, we might if we can do it by 2049, that'd be class. We could beat China to it.
But I'm worried we're going to have to wait till 2069, because that's when it'll be nice.
Based. Oh, you're gonna have some dickhead. It's like, why don't we just wait until 69? No. Yeah, well, anyway.
Because I'm impatient. Screw you.
Oh, I can't wait 4 millennia. Jesus fuck. Well, I suppose very patient people have no issues waiting that long. 4,000 years later. Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Is there anything else you wanted to say about developmentalism and environmentalism before we take a look at maybe some alternative measures to GDP that we can use to track social progress?
No, I think that's good. All right, I think the rest can sort of come out organically with the other parts.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So let's take a look at that next one then. So, what are some alternative measures to GDP that we can use to track social progress? I know there's a country that already does use one. It's like a global happiness index or something like that. And I always forget the name of the country, but you know, because we talked about this before.
Yes,
begins with a B. So
Bhutan.
Yes. Thank God I got that B. Right. Fuck. I was like, oh shit, does it begin with a B? Oh no. Okay, Bhutan. There you go. Brilliant. Yeah. So what are some alternative measures to GDP?
Right. So Bhutan is an example. They have this happiness index that they try and track various sort of environmental and life measures. And of course, Bhutan is like a relatively isolated, still monarchical system in the Himalayas. So there's aspects of it that focus a little bit overly much on social stability than anything else, but it is sort of a starting point that we can begin talking about other ways we can analyze the world. Because one thing that needs to be remembered about GDP is that GDP was a wartime measurement. It was developed in the Second World War to try and analyze how well the economies of the Allies were able to, how much stuff they could produce in order to fight and win the war. Which, pretty useful if you're trying to fight a war, but for most socialists, fighting wars isn't really what we're doing this all for. So, how to kind of approach this is to try and think about, all right, what are our real ideals and goals? It's not just to produce stuff. We don't just need tons and tons of stuff. What we need are things which are, say, making people's lives longer, decreasing our mental health problems, helping us live in a more sustainable and nicer environment. And these are actually things that, like, people just generally do want. Folks like the idea that, oh yeah, there's going to be trees that I can show my grandkids, and not just in museums. I'm going to like be able to have a home my entire life very securely. I'm going to like have all the food that I need and all of that. So a lot of this has to do with trying to come up with composites of some of these that can track like what we really are aiming for rather than just producing stuff. A great book that gets into some of this is a more recent one by Jason Hickel. He is a sociologist / economist from Lesotho, which is in South Africa. And he wrote this book, The Divide, that covers a lot of it as kind of gives us the broad overview of developmentalism, even takes a lot from world systems theory into it, and then asks, all right, where are some alternatives we can go to? Mm. And like some of his alternatives become a little bit, let's say, unambitious. For instance, he does have this idea that, oh, maybe we can just reform the IMF into something that gives good loans rather than bad loans.
Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Let's make capitalism friendly.
But there's still like good kernels that you can get from this and a good sense of what neoliberalism does and therefore what we can begin sort of imagining as alternatives. And indeed, like any sort of measurement that tries to judge how well our society can doing, you always have to be a little bit cautious with, because there's this phenomenon where if you make a test for something, then everything that you're trying to do becomes past the test. You see this in schools, you see this in GDP, you see this just everywhere in life. So you want to make it about a whole bunch of different things, and you want to sort of make it a little bit flexible. Like, people's goals and desires are probably going to change over time. Like, when you are a extremely poor country, probably your first thing is, I want to start having people starve so much. As you develop more, you might want to go, well, I want to make sure that our work hours aren't too long. And all that sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of, you know, it's really cool. You talked about this a little bit earlier on about how we sort of, actually, I think we sort of had a little bit of a back and forth dialogue about this earlier on, where we talked about how we're kind of forced to match the standards of the capitalist neoliberal Western world, the Western Europeans, the Americas, the Canadas, and so on and so forth. So I think it's really important that we can start to see alternative ways of developing to GDP. It doesn't necessarily need to be about your gross domestic product. It doesn't necessarily need to be about how much profit you make for the capitalists. There are other ways of conceptualizing the advancement of the human race, as they say. So there are other ways of conceptualizing. I think that's really, really interesting. There's another really interesting question that we have coming up next, and I'm quite keen to push forward on it, because I'm really interested in hearing your take on it. Are we good to move on to the next question, or did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Brilliant. So how can we critique developmentalist states? Maybe we'll just remind ourselves with a couple of examples of developmentalist states without falling into ultra-leftism or imperialism. And we might need to just remind ourselves of what we mean when we say ultra-leftism and when we say imperialism.
Yeah, sure. So a great example of this, and that can illuminate a lot of these things at the same time, Bolivia.
Yes.
So Evo Morales, he was the head of the Movement for Socialism, and his platform was more or less a developmentalist platform. Bolivia is, of course, the poorest country in South America. It is a nation that has, for a long time, been on the periphery. And even to this day is still primarily peripheral. And what Morales was pushing was for more sort of state planning and support to advance Bolivia past its peripheral status into at least the semi-periphery, if not in the long term, hopefully the core. And this, of course, created some contradictions within Bolivian society. Like, there were moments where Morales wanted to help logging industries develop in parts of the rainforest opposed by indigenous people there. And of course, as communists, we should be on the side of indigenous people and their struggles for.
Always.
Yeah. Now, that being said, ultra leftism, sort of best defined by Lenin with left communism, an infantile disorder.
Amazing book,
Lenin with his great titling.
Not controversial at all.
Oh, never, ever. So, what that takes is that we look at all situations and we go, okay, what's the most left position I can take? And anyone who doesn't always match that left position becomes completely as bad as, say, any other capitalist. So you can completely dismiss them without like acknowledging these nuances of degree.
That's a
and
good
parts
point.
of the
I can't help but as you're saying that, think of people who want to rail on about how the USSR became a fascist dictatorship in the latter half of its existence. And yes, it definitely did fall to revisionism. Of course, it went on the capitalist road, etc., etc. But to call it a fascist dictatorship, again, as you said, there's this issue of degree. You know, there's mountains and molehills, and you know, how do we sort of understand the relationship between this molehill, which is pretty small, and this mountain, which like we can't even see the top of because it's so far away. You know, it's just so massive.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is, you know, the USA compared to like the USSR, really. You know, so it's a really, really good way of conceptualizing. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is a fantastic example. And of course, we saw this in Bolivia, where some folks would go, well, okay, yeah, I don't support the fascist coup, but I also can't support Mas. And here are these examples of where Mas was not doing the good communist position. And we can agree. Yes, those examples were real. Mas was not doing the good communist position. At the same time, like, the country wasn't about to go into a communist revolution. It was either a fascist counter-revolution or the working masses of Bolivia backing Mas. And luckily, in 2020, those working masses won. So we got a nice little win out of that.
Crazy, by the way, like unbelievable that actually got reversed. I mean, like we haven't.
Absolutely.
This actually, it's kind of challenging for a Marxist-Leninist analysis, to be honest with you. Like we wouldn't have expected this to be possible ever, like within the realm of bourgeois democracy and parliamentarianism and so on and so forth. Like this shouldn't have happened. You know, this is new. I think in some ways, you know, like when we think of like Allende and stuff like that, that's probably like the furthest social democracy has ever come. What's happening in Bolivia seems to be, you know, maybe going a little bit further than that as well. So I think this is interesting, maybe uncharted territory for social democrats, or you know, if you want to say democratic socialists, that's fine.
Yeah.
As Marxist-Leninists, we probably don't make that much of a distinction, but yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting. Pay a lot of attention to what's happening here, and let's see what happens.
I do agree to an extent, though I think that we can also potentially overstate some of its uniqueness, given that in many ways they were using tactics that were similar to what happened in the Bolivian water wars back in the early 2000s that brought Evo Morales to power in the first place, like having these union-led blockades of roads that kind of crippled transportation in the country, which was also a little bit of a tactic used by the CIA against Allende. So it was nice seeing that kind of twisted against them.
Yeah, absolutely. Chickens coming home to roost.
And this is great that basically a social democratic, and I would say that even more than social democratic, what best describes the Morales government is a developmentalist mindset. And of course, now it's post-Morales, and now we've got Arca, who is there. But still, it is very much this movement that has indigenous elements, that even does have some communist elements to it, but is primarily being spearheaded by a developmentalist outlook. And of course, this does mean that they try to keep more like state influence in the economy, and it works. Like Bolivia had rapidly falling poverty, rapidly rising education, all of that. We just also need to, at the same time, recognize that there are limits to this. That
of course, yeah.
Bolivia is not at a point where it's actually at those limits yet. Like, you don't have still like 20% of your people in poverty and call that a day.
Yeah, that's right.
But that, like, at some point, we're going to need to, the Bolivian working masses will find themselves in increasing contradictions in one way or another, just like all working classes do. So we don't fall into imperialism because we recognize that, yeah, the fucking imperialists are the worst for this. Like, obviously, the CIA are the definite bad guys. But we also don't fall into ultra-leftism because we go, okay, yeah, there are things that we would argue should be done better, parts of this ideology that don't actually align with our own.
And we should,
but that being said,
should actually be clear that, like, when we support these movements, this isn't exactly what we are advocating for. We're not advocating for this where we are exactly as it is right there, you know. We are still Marxist-Leninists, or whatever you might be, whether you're a Maoist or a Trotskyist or, you know, whatever it is. This isn't exactly. We can still support this from an anti-imperialist perspective, and I think that's really, really important. We're not necessarily saying that just because what they're doing is kind of working, that we want to do that. We might be revolutionaries and recognize that this is more of what we might call, I don't want to say this like pejoratively, but I mean more like reform. It's more reformist, if we're being honest. I don't know how to say that in a way that doesn't sound, you know, kind of condescending or kind of shitty or whatever. But I mean, it is. It's a reformist kind of movement, and that's okay. That's okay. You know, it's the kind of, it's the center leftist way forward, and especially in this kind of situation, this kind of global south, this kind of periphery situation. It's not like the social democracy of the first world, of the core, where it necessarily relies on the exploitation of countries in the global south in order to sustain itself, like, say, France, as we talked about earlier on, with the post-colonial taxes of the 14 African countries. Social democracy in the global south, or in the periphery, it's not necessarily as antagonistic. It is a contradiction to communist, of course, but it's not as it's not the antagonistic contradiction that it would be within the cores, you know, or within the places that are, you know, more benefiting from the global capitalist imperialist system. So that it's kind of important that we do address that question. I did want to just briefly situate this question of ultra leftism, the left and the right thing, and how we can understand that. I wanted to talk slightly more about that, but more than that, I really need to go to the bathroom. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. Yep.
I get to the stage, I get to between 1 hour and 2 hours, and at some point then I'm just like, oh, I'm so sorry, but I really need to go to the bathroom. Do you mind if I run to the bathroom real quickly? And I'm not sure if did you want to say anything more on that, or did you want to push on with the next question? I can give you the next question. You can talk a little bit about that. I can circle back and come back to this distinction with like ultra leftism, rightism, and how that sort of fits into our analysis as communists.
Right. I can. I think I'll talk a little bit more about like the ultra leftism and rightism and all that.
Yeah, that'd be good, because then, like, when I come back, it's still on topic, and it's still, people will still.
Yeah.
It won't be like a random thing. You're not talking about like
Yeah.
like you're not talking about like Namibia, and I'm just like, no, let's return to ultra leftism. So yeah, okay, good. Thank you very much, Grant. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. I'm back in, hopefully less than a minute. But well, you got any complaints that I take too long, so let's see how it goes.
Sure.
Back in a sec. See you then.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
Yeah, so I guess to expand on that, I totally agree with Paul there, and great use of Mao's On Contradiction. If anyone in the chat hasn't read that one, please do. It is fantastic. But yes, that when we are like making critiques, we don't want to fall into like this sort of thing of just condemning anyone who actually wants to push things forward as ultra-leftist. That's completely not what we're going for here. Instead, what we're trying to do is trying to keep based in degrees of practicality and degrees of understanding where situations are at the moment and what is net advances at the moment. So with the Bolivia case, what would not be ultra-leftist is to say things such as, well, Evo Morales isn't giving us communism, or that, well, there are like these situations where the mass movement has violated indigenous rights or pushed too hard against the environment and all that sort of thing, and that's not ultra-leftism. What is ultra-leftism is going, well, because of that, it really doesn't matter whether or not the Evo Morales is president or Janine Áñez is president. Like, both of them are capitalist bastards who can all go to hell.
Oh, capitalist
We're not
bastards
going
who
there.
can all go to hell. Sorry, that's the first thing I heard.
Yeah. Great thing to come back on.
I agree with that sentiment. I don't know where it came from, but I definitely agree with it.
But that is, however, I was saying that that's not, you can't just throw both Mass and Janine Áñez in the same bucket and throw them out like that. But at the same time, there are cases when you can do that. If the Democrats and Republicans right now are like cops and Proud Boys are in open brawls in the capital of Washington, they're both fascist bastards. So down with both their parties. If anything, the Proud Boys are less able to actually run a damn thing than the cops, so probably easier to topple.
Amazing. I just think of like the Thomas Sankara there. Down with them.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Anarcho-syndicalists.
Always
down with them.
Down with it.
I love that. Oh, it's such a good way of framing it. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's a good question. Are we still talking about like the left and the right and ultra-leftism and right, or did we go off course a little bit?
Yeah, so I was just sort of just trying to explain a little bit deeper about like where like left critiques of people are not ultra-leftism. It's a very specific phenomenon that you do see that is much more about.
Well, what I would say is that ultra-leftism kind of refers to, strangely, ultra-leftism kind of refers to about three different things, which is a little bit strange. We kind of, for some reason, we make a distinction between left-wing communism, and ultra-leftists, So that's kind of one thing that we do. We kind of think of like people who are sort of falling in with this, how can I say, like people who follow like the Rosa Luxemburg kind of tradition. To the left of the Bolsheviks, you're criticizing the system that they have. Almost quasi-anarchistic in some ways, libertarian communists. These are kind of like one category of ultra-leftists who we might see. Left comms. They're like one category of ultra-leftists. And we don't necessarily always think of them as ultra-left and left comms the same thing, but it actually is one category of ultra-leftism. It's one useful category. Another interesting category is Trotskyists. Trotskyists have
Yeah.
historically always been to the left, like just this left opposition,
Hmm.
this kind of left opposition to the Bolsheviks, to Stalin, the
Yep.
centrist kind of communist figure, which is kind of funny. Like that, you're the center far leftist, you know, you're the centrist
Right.
communist, which is amazing. I love thinking about that.
Yep.
You know, when we start situating these things, what the fuck does it mean by left and right? When we think of left, we think
Yeah.
of progressive. Right, you're ahead.
Hmm.
You want to move forward. When we think of right, we think backward. You want to go backward. You're slow. You're behind. Right. You maybe want
Hmm.
to go actually backwards. Maybe you're a traditionalist. Right. You're actually a fascist. Like you're full on. You actually want to go backwards in society. You are maybe one of these third or fourth positionists. You want to go back to the Roman Empire, some sort of ridiculous shit like that, right? That's full on extreme rightism, you know. And this we see this as well in the communist movement, right? So when we talk about like ultra leftism, what we're talking about is people who are too far ahead of the masses. Okay, you're too far ahead of where things are right now. You're making unrealistic demands. You are calling to arms in a situation where that might not be appropriate. You're saying, everybody take up your arms, let's storm the Winter Palace, in a situation where that's totally fucking ridiculous. You're going to get
Yeah.
killed and slaughtered. It doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It doesn't. You're not actually with the masses. It doesn't make any sense, you know. And so that's an ultra leftist deviation. It's if you know, we can call it like left opportunism as well, you know. So you know, we talked about those kind of two examples of ultra leftism. So we
Yeah.
talked about left communism. We talked about Trotskyism. There's another one, and I can't remember right now. Do you remember right now? There's like a third category.
Okay.
I actually can't remember
I'm trying to
right
think.
now exactly. There's like a third category of left communists that, excuse me, of ultra leftism that I can't really remember right now, but it does exist.
That's not the anarcho-communists, is it?
Yeah, fuck it. I actually I don't think that's the one that I was thinking of, but let's
Mm.
just say it's anarchism, because that's also a kind of a form of ultra leftism where you can actually see this playing out where you're demanding. And actually, I don't want to be disparaging to our comrades, because actually I love
Yeah.
anarchists. I think they're absolutely great. Their hearts 100% in the right place. I love them. I think they're fantastic. They see injustice and they're like, fuck this, let's do
Absolutely.
communism. So I absolutely love
Yeah.
anarchists. But I think the issue is they're like, let's do communism right now. Let's have a revolution, do communism right thereafter. Whereas we know that actually we need to have a transitional stage. We need to have socialism, and then we
Sure.
can have a full epoch of that, and then we can actually proceed into communism. You know, you can't just go directly from capitalism to communism. It doesn't work like that. I mean, otherwise
Oh, sure. Yeah.
you end up with this sort of Campuchian situation, Pol Pot trying to
Yeah.
abolish money while still needing to trade in the world global capitalist system. So you end up just having this
Mhm.
other commodity, which ends up being rice, which is produced. So you have this state capitalism going on. It's ridiculous. It's chaotic. You can't do
Yep.
communism right here, right now. You can find this if you're a hippie and you're the person who earlier
Mhm.
on we talked about like individual people who are like individualist anti-capitalists. They're so mad about the situation that they
Yeah.
just go off and form like a commune in the countryside, and you know, maybe
Oh,
they
yeah.
get like 10 of their friends, 20 of their friends, 100 of their friends, and they get together and they have this commune, and it's pretty fucking cool. But they still need
Mhm.
money. They still need to produce. They
Yeah.
still need to. There's still this issue with the value form. You know, they're still
Oh,
not
yeah.
dealing with the problem of the anarchy of production. They're still not dealing with the falling rates of
Mhm.
profit. So they end up just doing this collective capitalism, which still needs to contribute
Yes.
to this overall system. It doesn't actually deal with the problem. It doesn't eliminate that which causes the problem, which is one of the big issues, and that's one of the things that ultra leftists don't see. You know, they sort of
Yes.
want to be at this end point. They want to say, let's do communism right now. Let's fucking do it. Let's just fucking have let's just get a load of AK-47s, a load of Kalashnikovs, and storm the Winter Palace, overthrow the White House.
Yeah.
Problem solved. We'll just do global communism right away. But you can't.
Mhm.
There's so much more
Yeah.
that needs to be done. There's so many steps that need to be traversed before you can get there, you know. And I think a lot of people, you know, they just they don't really understand that yet. They haven't looked at history and what's worked, what hasn't worked. They haven't looked at, you know, the Spanish Civil War periods and this attempts. They haven't looked at Trotsky. They haven't looked at, you know, they haven't looked at the
Yeah.
Bolshevik Revolution. They haven't looked at the Paris Commune. They haven't looked at the Chinese Revolution. They haven't looked at any of these things, and they think, let's just hit the big red communist button.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
he says, you know. in the chat there. So yeah, that's kind of it. You know, that's ultra leftism when you're getting too far ahead of the masses to a level that's unrealistic, that doesn't actually represent the material conditions that you find yourself in. You know, so that's kind of the issue. So when we return to this question, this world systems theory, right? And we start talking about how we can critique these countries which are taking a developmental process. How can we critique Bolivia? You know, how can we say Bolivia? We can look at Bolivia and say, oh well, they're not doing full communism. Fuck them. They don't have a stateless, classless, moneyless society. What the fuck?
Oh, yeah.
They're just a bunch of capitalists. They're this, they're that. I mean, so yeah, I mean, and this kind of feeds in as well to the next question, which I think we can probably tie into this. I mean, we're sort of coming up nearly 2 hours into it. So how can we critique this drive for economic growth without becoming anti-technology or keeping the global south poor? I mean, because that seems to be kind of the way that it goes. Like if I say fuck Bolivia's drive towards development, it's kind of like, okay, well, am I pushing them into underdevelopment? Do I want them to stay poor and undeveloped and to be this kind of feudal, quasi-state capitalists kind of primitivist society? Or like what do we really want here? Do we want space communism of abundance where everything's cool and we can do whatever the fuck we want and we've got everything that we need? Or do we want people just living back in the Stone Age and fucked over by everyone who has a gun because we don't use technology and we can't produce guns, you know? What is it that we actually want here, and how do we I suppose correctly approach these situations as communists, as let's say centrist communists, without falling into let's say rightism or ultra leftism? What do you think? What are some principled Marxist Leninists' takes on this?
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad that you tied this into that last question, because I was about to suggest that anyways. Because yeah, what we don't want to wind up doing is going, oh yeah, here I am in my
armchair.
It's winter, so heated home, in a nice armchair, like on the internet discussing communism, and I'm just going, you know what? You guys should really go back to that peasant lifestyle. That's what you need. No, that's not what we want as communists.
The good old days of fucking, I don't know, hunter-gatherer societies.
Right. And this is how we see that these are fundamentally reactionary ideas, right? Because, like, this is about, yes, let's go back to this past.
Idealized,
That's the definition of reaction.
Exactly. It's the prelapsarian idea, isn't it? Like, everything was cool before the postmodern cultural neo-Marxists came in and fucked everything up. The Frankfurt School fucked everything up for us. Everything was cool. Let's go back to the good old days of capitalism. Merchant capitalism. Everything was great.
So,
do you remember the 1950s when everything was cool? If you were a white man in the United States of America with a decent job.
Oh, yeah.
But if you weren't that, then...
And, you know, as long as you don't do something dumb like identify as communist or something like that.
Wait, was that... I think it was more... wasn't it... I think it was kind of like after the Second War. After the Second World War. Things got really
there was a first... there was a first Red Scare right after the...
That's right.
The first Red Scare, which formed the FBI, was right after World War I.
Oh, that's right. But there was like a period. There was like 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 or 4 years where like the US kind of made peace with the USSR. There's like these films coming in, like showing like women in the workplace and everything like that in the USSR, and they were like, "Hey, this is it. This is women's liberation. Like it's normal for women to be actually materially equal to men," you know?
Right.
And of course within like the sort of nuclear family framework that was being pushed, the American dream, within this American dream framework, this was really radical and super progressive and stuff like that. So wasn't it? That was probably like in the 40s or something like that, though, wasn't it? Maybe like the early 40s,
I think there's a little minor event that happened around that time. It might have involved the Germans. Maybe a bit of the Japanese and Italians on the side, but, you know, I'm sure none of that stuff's important. But to get a little bit back on the question, specifically, that how we can approach this is by trying to empower, by pushing everything to empower the masses on all levels. So, one thing that people can screw up on is, oh, well, if you don't follow all the liberal democratic norms, then you're disempowering the masses. Nah. Instead, at every stage, we need to be saying, okay, but you should be putting more power into the hands of everyday working people, because that's what's going to develop people into the mindset and the skills that produce the communist world that we're working on. So Venezuela actually has some decent examples of this, where one of the things that got talked about as the scary thing that Chavez and Maduro did were these community organizations that the U.S. always says, oh, these are gangs. But no, what it is local communities who are then empowered to run various things, whether it be like their education, whether it be their workplaces, even some degree of like community defense and all of that. And the more that you do that, the more that your system doesn't even become reliant on the state anymore. That's a real withering away of the state. And this, like, in some ways, can sound a little bit anarchist, because after all, aren't the anarchists all about these councils? But it's not only like council forms, of course. Instead, it's just
they
about...
have some good points. I like the anarchists.
Yeah. Listen, I like anarchists. David Graeber is one of my favorite writers.
David Graeber is great. I love that. I love that.
Yep.
Death.
R.I.P. David Graeber.
I've got a yes, rest in peace, Conrad. I'm actually I've got my computer like cropped up on David Graeber's book Debt. What's it called? Debt. The first 5,000 years.
History. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Really.
That was the
book
that radicalized me.
Really? Yeah. He
first,
uses the word communism.
First, like, real anarchist book.
Yeah.
He does, and he really does a good job of sort of breaking into this mindset of communism is this thing that there are parts of it that you do and that can be done more.
Yes, definitely. Exactly, it's the use value. You're really getting back into this old Marxist idea of, what we call the abolition of the value form or something like that. It's not just we're not just producing for exchange value, right? We're actually producing use value. This is use. Ultimately, work and labor power. These are things that we do as humans. This is part of, to use that reactionary position, human nature. It's what we do. But what we do fundamentally is produce use values, and we produce use for people. So why the fuck not? Why would you not fucking help your mates out when they need? Your mate doesn't have a house. Let's build a house for him. That's what you fucking do. That's why the fucking wheel was created. That's why fucking fire was created, because your mates needed it. Your friends needed it. There was production outside of capitalism.
Exactly.
People are always extremely disappointed to hear when they say, oh well, if there wasn't capitalism, then why would I go to work? Why would I do anything? Why would I get up out of bed in the morning? It's like, well, why the fuck did the person get out of bed when they needed to, I don't know, eat or fuck or have fun with their friends, or when they created the wheel, or when they created fire, or when they did anything before the, let's say, the long 16th century, which is, I suppose, really from like the mid 1400s to the late 1600s, when capitalism became kind of, I suppose, instantiated as this global system. It really came to be as this global system between those couple of hundred years, 1400s to 1600s, and yeah, so there is production outside of it, but I can't remember how we got onto this point. So
no, right.
I'm a little bit lost.
That actually all just plays into the answer for the question, and the answer is basically that the more you like empower and enable the people, while understanding that you need to have like some degree of coordination as long as you're trying to defend yourself against the impositions, both like directly military and also economic, of a capitalist world, the more that you are advancing the cause of socialism and communism. So ultimately, it's about being the most democratic system that there is, and democratic in the genuine sense,
Like
not in
real
like the
sense.
bullshit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's not every fucking 4 years you get to vote on which member of the ruling
exactly.
class is going to lord over you, which is like the most
Yeah,
fucking ridiculous bourgeois understanding of democracy ever. You know, I would rather
exactly.
I would rather be able to have a little bit of a fucking say over what happens in my workplace that I go to every
Yeah,
fucking day of my life than of what
exactly.
the ruling class pay on their taxes on this year, on that year, etc., etc., which is kind of what bourgeois politics is. Should you pay, I don't know,
Yep.
fucking 20% or 21%? That's basically Republicans versus Democrats right there, you know.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. So,
I'm sorry,
and
comrade. I'm actually at the stage where
yeah, that's
I'm
good.
a little bit, let's say, tipsy, to be generous.
I have not had enough vanilla porters to quite catch
No,
up with you, but
you need to have a little
you're
bit more Sprite
spitting
to.
fire. So,
Thanks, comrade. I appreciate that. How can we critique developmental states? We talked a little bit about ultra leftism. We talked a little. I think
yeah,
we talked enough about leftism, imperialism, without falling into imperialism, without falling into this kind of Western chauvinist mindset. And I think that might
that's good.
also, alongside that, might feed into the next question pretty well. So we can kind of probably address the two of them together. So, how can we critique the drive for economic growth without becoming anti technology or keeping the global south poor? Right. So, it's really
Yeah,
important. I mean, like, because as we said, we
mhm,
don't just want to go back to monkey.
right. Yeah,
We don't
not
want all
monkey.
of them to just stay there, you know. Aside from
Yeah,
how fucking based that is.
right. Oh yeah. Well, nice to be able to climb up trees every now and then, but well,
Grab a few
this
bananas,
goes
that's
in.
cool.
All this kind of plays into a little bit of how we talked about like the connection between developmentalism and environmentalism or alternate measures to GDP. What we're doing is we're saying that, hey, like, don't make the GDP your target. Don't make like economic growth your target. You may need to have economic growth for certain things, but understand that that growth is being done for a specific purpose. It's so that you can say, get enough hospital equipment so that you can readily get those COVID vaccines out or something,
Mm,
or it's so that you can uh, have these educational systems that are going to open people up to new sorts of ideas. Uh, and that we then are able to turn around and critique when, oh, hey, those educational systems have just become indoctrination factories, or, oh, hey, those hospitals you built are only going for like the rich Western tourists you've got. So we don't fall into imperialism by this because we aren't falling for like the liberals who come up with critiques like this. If they don't have like a fundamental understanding of overall class conflict or overall imperialism, you're assholes who are worse than whatever we're getting right now. So just go in the corner and take your CIA paychecks and shut up.
Shut the fuck up, Pol Pot.
For, yeah. But for like people who do like have some degree of imperialism understanding, we go, okay, yeah, you're right, imperialism's bad, but we can do more than just fight imperialism because imperialism is the world system. So we are not just opposing the United States, though the United States is the single largest country that pushes this. We are opposing the system that it is propping up. And that is how we really get into this.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I think that and of course, like the anti-technology thing, uh, yeah, obviously, I don't want to die from preventable diseases. Nobody wants to die from preventable diseases, so we're not throwing out the modern hospital. Uh,
We're not going back to monkey.
right. Sorry, guys. Hospitals or prisons, I get it, but maybe that's the one exception we'll have to prisons.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Stop fucking reading Foucault. Put down your Foucault. Jesus fucking Christ. Not everything is a fucking prison. Jesus fuck. Oh
Or
my god.
maybe just have a better reading of Foucault, because Foucault himself, I think, was a little bit subtler than that.
Yeah, he was. He was, isn't it? Oh my god, it's the sound bites on Twitter, I suppose, that fucking
Yeah.
how can I say concentrate these issues, the
Yep.
most contentious points for every. Same thing happens with settlers all the fucking
Yeah.
time. Oh my
Oh, yeah.
fucking god. Ah,
Right.
10,000. Let me tell you why I hate settlers. 10,000 tweets later, by the way. I haven't actually read it. I just saw this great,
Yep.
this great fucking thread about it on
Yes.
fucking Twitter, and I saw this pretty cool fucking page on 4chan about it. So you should check that out too. I haven't actually read it yet, but this is why I fucking hate it. This is the fucking thing. I fucking see this all the time with things that they haven't really looked into. People haven't actually looked into what these terms mean, and it causes all kinds of problems, all kinds of confusion. People look at settlers and they think, oh, that just means white people bad,
Mhm.
without understanding
And
what.
so I'm going to use that particular segue to just shout out to uh, Young Simba on YouTube and Twitter. Uh,
Based young Simba.
a few other people, Deadman was in there too,
Mm.
like discussions for a while, and you read it with some folks who didn't like grow up with this mentality of, oh, I'm white and that means all these things about me.
Yes.
And you'll learn so much more than you do out of a Twitter thread. And you know what? You get this good sort of balance of where like you can have critiques and where no, they're dead on and all of that. Because any book that you don't have at least one critique of, you probably haven't read close enough. But any book
Yes.
that you haven't learned something good out of, you also haven't read closely enough.
Yes. Oh, that's such a good point. Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that because, like, when it comes to this issue, like this thing of settlers, like, yes, I understand that there are problems with it. Actually, they definitely misquoted. Sakai definitely misquoted
Yes.
William Z. Foster. No doubt about it. That was a bad faith misrepresentation of what William Z.
Sure.
Foster said. That shouldn't have done that. Okay, Grant. Does that mean that the other 600 pages of the book should be thrown out? No, you
Oh yeah.
fuckhead.
And
What's wrong with you? Jesus fuck. It's one bad misquotation. It's bad. You shouldn't fucking take that at face value. You should
mhm,
know that that's an incorrect quotation, misquotation, whatever you want to say, it's incorrect, but there's
yeah.
still truth in there. There's still valuable and useful stuff in there that we should look at. And so many people have come at me for this in the last few days that I've literally ended up fucking.
Oh jeez.
Oh my god, I've actually ended up blocking people over this shit. I swear to God, they want you to be either
Hmm.
everything Sakai said is the word of God.
Yep.
It's Jesus. It's sacrament. It's
Yep.
perfect. Or you're anti-Sakaiist, you hate it,
Yep.
and you're also like low-key a white supremacist.
Yep. Yep.
You're either one extreme or the other. You can't actually have a nuanced understanding of anything. You can't take some good
Hmm.
and some
Oh
bad
yeah.
some bad from these things. But we need to. We are dialectical materialists. This is exactly what we do.
Exactly.
We have the thesis, we have the antithesis, and then we have the synthesis. We're constantly clashing heads with each other, and that's what we do. That's what we do as Marxists. We're always clashing heads. We're always writing these polemics against each other, against ourselves. The left is eating itself, as they say. And this is what we
Right.
do.
Right.
We're always attacking each other. But why? Why are we doing this? So that we can get to the most correct position. There's a reason why. There's a reason why we do this. And unfortunately, when we resort to this kind of it's black or it's white, it's this or it's that kind of thinking, we abandon that. We abandon dialectical materialism, and as a result of that, we abandon historical materialism. You know, it's all good or it's all bad. I mean, that's idealist thinking. You know,
Yeah.
so if you hear some dickhead who's just like throw the baby out with the bathwater, that's an idealist. That's a fucking liberal. That's not a communist who's saying that. But yeah, they're
Hmm.
unfortunately they're fucking everywhere, you know. But we need to push back at this as Marxists, you know. We need to say, well, okay, there's some bad parts, but also there's some good parts. Let's look at those as well, and let's see, do they work? Can we use any of this? Does any of this help us moving forward? You know, and
Absolutely. And
let's see what we
Paul, I
build.
am so glad that I have converted you to the religion of blockism. We are blocking everyone.
Oh fuck! I didn't for a long time. I didn't. I for a long time
Yeah.
I was very libertarian-y for so long,
Yeah.
where I was really like, I don't want to block anyone because ultimately people can be redeemed, people can fuck up, but at some point
Yeah.
they'll realize that they're being dickheads. We don't need to actually block them. But since I've started talking about the situation in Ireland, since I've started talking about issues, okay, you can talk about international issues, that's fine. Someone's coming at you and they live in fucking, I don't know, they live in fucking Russia or something
Yeah.
like that. You don't care. You just don't give a
Right.
shit. It's like, who fucking cares? You live on the other
Yeah.
side of
Yeah.
the world. To me, I don't care. And apologies to comrades in Russia who are listening to this. But if you live so far away from someone, I'm sorry, but you don't care that much
Yeah.
about, because you're not like, oh, this person's gonna fucking knock on my door tomorrow.
Right. Right.
But like,
Yeah.
I noticed this. I know I did. I noticed this quite recently. I would have been quite upset when someone would come at me this time last year, if someone came at me and they were like, "Oh, fuck you, you dickhead, you communist, you're saying this, you're saying that, whatever." A year ago, I would have been like, "Oh, fuck, am I a dickhead? Am I just a communist?" Whatever. Now with have you heard about the situation with George Nkencho in Dublin? I'm not sure. You might have heard a little bit about it, but
Oh.
not have the full situation. Maybe that's. Have you heard anything about this?
No, I haven't.
Let me tell you a little bit about this. There was this
Hmm?
young man, George Nkencho or George Nkencho. I don't know how to fully pronounce the surname. But his young man, I think he was 27 or 28 years old, and he had mental health difficulties. He was he was a young black man, and he had mental health difficulties, and he was killed by An Garda Síochána, the police force of Ireland,
Mm.
about maybe it was 5, 6, 7 days ago, about a week ago, let's say.
Yeah.
And it caused all of these this uproar in Ireland. Everybody's like, "Whoa, the police just killed this
Right.
black guy. Why the fuck did they kill him?" You know, there's this in Ireland, right?
Right. Right.
Because Irish people, you know, and this kind of gets back to this question earlier on when it comes to like colonialism, settler colonialism, all this stuff. Irish
Mm.
people, because we have been historically racialized in a certain way, we kind of feel ourselves naturally to be kind
Yeah.
of above racism. That can't
Uh huh.
that can't
Yep.
happen in Ireland. No way. Our police force can't be racist. What? No way.
Right.
But this young guy, you know, he got shot dead by the police. You know, after his sister came to the door and said, "Hey, whoa, my brother has mental health problems. Please don't, shoot him.
Right.
Please don't kill him." And he got shot dead by the police. There was like about 15 police officers, Garda on Garda Síochána, and they shot him dead. And it's caused this uproar, this outrage, and it's horrific.
Yeah.
He had a knife. You know, he grabbed like a kitchen
Mhm.
knife or something like that, and there was like 15 police officers coming for him. He was clearly experiencing some kind of mental breakdown, some kind of issues in terms of mental health. And what he really needed was mental health support.
Of
Um,
course.
Actually, it's very telling that if you look at the reports, he actually,
Hmm.
not he, his family, signed him
Hmm.
in to get mental health supports a number of months ago,
Yeah.
many months ago. They were like, here, our son has mental health problems.
Hmm.
Let's get him taken after. Let's get him taken care of. Okay, let's get him the mental health support that he needs. Okay, from this system.
Yeah.
So they asked for that. They requested that from the HSE, the Health Service Executive, which is the health system within Ireland, the public health
Hmm.
system in Ireland. And he didn't
Yeah.
get that. It's been over. It's either 2 or 3 months later, and he hasn't gotten any support. And as a result, he has this meltdown, this breakdown, and he gets shot by the police, shot dead by the
Hmm.
police. You know. So
Yeah.
really fucking horrific and terrible, and an example of the system failing people. You know, the system failing the people.
Yep.
And we can say that that's the mental health system. We can say that's the capitalist system. We can say that this is kind of a white supremacist system. We could say that this
Mhm.
is maybe individual Garda who thought, okay, here's a young black man who has a knife in his hand. He must be some, I don't know. And this is something that the
Yeah.
people like the far right on Twitter have been saying, that he was like a machete wielding maniac. They were actually saying that he had a machete, if you'd fucking believe that.
Ugh.
Yeah, it was just a knife that he picked up in his
Oh, and
kitchen
that's
to get
some
away.
very racialized language right there.
Exactly, and you know, people don't even want to say that it's racialized language, but it is racialized language,
Right?
and it's
Yeah.
there's a reason why they're using the term machete and not like, I don't
Hmm.
know, like they're not saying like it's a butcher's knife or something like that. You know, they're not saying it's a sword or anything
Right.
like that. You know, because they have these racialized
Hmm.
assumptions of what machete means. You know, and yeah, it's really fucked up. So they ended up shooting dead this guy who had picked up a knife in his kitchen to fight off like 15 Garda who followed him back. And yeah, it's a super
Yeah.
super fucked up system that we have right now. And
Mhm.
George and Kencho got fucked over by it. And all I can say is rest in peace. I'm so sorry. But when we talk
Yes,
about this,
indeed.
why we've gotten onto the subject is we talked about like blocking. All I
Yeah.
said, all I said was that I posted a little picture showing that he had um requested mental health support a number of months
Yeah.
ago from the HSE, from Ireland's public health system, and that all I said was the system failed George and Kensho. No, I didn't
Yeah.
say what system that was. I didn't say that was capitalism. I didn't say that was capitalist
Hmm.
imperialism. I didn't say that was a mental health system. I didn't say that was the health system in Ireland. But
Oh, yeah.
even just that, the system failed, which is like the most basic of liberal analyses.
Yeah.
Even
And
that,
so obvious.
so fucking obvious. Even just saying that one thing, like, just have a little look. Go onto my Twitter, have a little look there if anyone is curious. Have a little look at the reactionaries responding to that. There's no, maybe not hundreds, but there's dozens and dozens of reactionaries in those comments, leaving comments, retweets, retweet quote tweets, all kinds of things, just about how I am saying that the Garda as an individual was this horrific racist. He was a fascist. About how just the most ridiculous, extremist, abductio ad absurdum arguments you can imagine, and it kind of goes to show just how I suppose reactionary a lot of Irish people have become.
Yeah.
How we've assimilated to this system so much. You know, when we talk about like core, semi periphery, and periphery, I mean, Ireland would have been very much semi periphery until at least the late 60s to the
Hmm.
70s.
Yeah.
And now we're pretty much part of that core. We might not be the core of the core like Germany is, but we're definitely in that sort of general
Yep.
broad core category as part of the European Union. And unfortunately, we've taken on all of the problems of being part of that European Union, of this
Hmm.
horrific European, Eurocentric, colonial, imperialist project, which is being white supremacist, and it is being imperialist, and it is
Yeah.
being settler colonial. And yeah, so if people don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, just go ahead and have a little look on my Twitter there and look at that little message. I think it was yesterday I sent that the tweet out, and yeah, it's pretty fucked up. So Yeah, block,
Yeah, I was
block,
just.
just block, block,
Yeah.
block, block, block. All these fuckers, just fuck it, just block them all.
Oh yeah.
Why waste your time?
But that's like a this is such a clear example of that this is a world system, that
Yes.
this core ideology spreads from like countries like the United States, or Germany, or like the UK, and then it infects populations, and it is such a perfect example of the bullshit of, like, I mentioned him at the very beginning, like the Sam Huntington class of civilizations thing, because
Mm-hmm.
if you had looked at Ireland, like back in the days of James Connolly, these were folks who were standing in solidarity with the African
Yes.
subjects of the
And
British Empire.
by the way, not only like James Connolly, we're thinking like late 1800s, and we're thinking
Yeah,
like early 1900s, we're thinking 1916 Rising, etc. No, not even just that,
yeah,
right? After then, you have this Free State period where Ireland sort of
yes.
becomes this kind of lackey country to EU imperialism, and it sort of transitions towards that between the early 1920s and the 1970s, and kind of from the 1970s to the mid 2000s, it becomes, in that period, it becomes like a proper quote pal of EU
Mm-hmm.
imperialism, of France, of Germany, and the UK, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Um, but that's the Free State. That's the Republic of Ireland. That's the 26 counties,
right,
what we might call Southern Ireland. But if you look at Northern
right,
Ireland, if you look at the occupied six counties, this same
mm-hmm.
sentiment
Yeah,
that you're referring to with James Connolly was echoed in the
yeah,
resistance struggles as late between the 1970s and the 1990s.
yep,
And
mm-hmm.
this is because
Oh yeah,
it's a colonized nation. The Irish are a colonized nation. The six counties are
absolutely,
colonized, right? And so you find yourself in solidarity with colonized groups all over the world. So you
mm,
have people like the IRA during the troubles between the late
yeah,
60s and the mid 1990s, showing solidarity and feeling themselves in kinship with the Palestinian struggle and with
mm-hmm.
the black nationalists or the black national liberation struggle, comrades over in the United States, and all these groups all over the world. These colonial subjects. You
Yeah,
see the IRA in solidarity with them. Between the 60s and the 90s. I mean, that's like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. You
yeah,
see that happening. But
and
nowadays,
and
but nowadays, post
yeah,
Good Friday agreements from the mid 1990s, 1996 onwards, really, and you don't necessarily have that quite as much. You have a little bit with left wing groups, of course, but not necessarily it doesn't necessarily have the kind of
right.
mass support that we would hope for as communists, as leftists, as socialists, or anti-imperialists generally and broadly, or whatever.
It's almost like one of the effects of the world system in integrating, especially into its core pieces,
Yes,
is to promote racialized views of the world.
exactly.
And you know what? We could probably go for like another 2 hours just talking about how it does that.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is a fantastic example of how, like, the whole drive to join the core mm, doesn't just, it's not just an effect of the economics, but it has these effects on what you might think of as the superstructure, on the culture, on these ways of how people understand themselves, where they view their loyalties as being on both the national and international scale. And in some ways, this homogenizing everything into the bourgeois settler ideal, uh, even for countries that were previously settled.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
fuck.
yeah.
I
So
should
great
still
example.
say by the way, when we talk about like previously settled and that, like,
Mhm. Yeah.
Ireland
Oh,
is
and
still
is still.
settled. It's just that there's a greater illusion.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah,
been a degree of mysticism that's kind of made us forget that Ireland is still an occupied country. You know that there's still 6 counties of Ireland which are occupied by the
sure.
imperialists, right? And even by the way, I would say that Ireland is both colonized and semi-colonized. Colonized
Hmm.
directly in the
Yep.
old-fashioned sense of the term in the 6 counties in the north of Ireland, and
Oh
also
yeah.
I would say semi-colonized or neo-colonized in the 26 counties of Ireland. I mean, this is one thing that James Connolly really pointed out, in that it doesn't
Yep.
really fucking matter if we become a capitalist, quote, free Ireland, a free and independent capitalist Ireland would still
Yep.
be beholden to the UK. You know, we would just have, quote, Irish, quote,
Mhm.
people who are sort of the administrators of capitalist rule. You know, they would still control us through their landlords, through their bankers, through their financiers, so on and so forth. I mean, there's that great. It's that great text by James Connolly, "Socialism and Nationalism" from 1897. You can there's an amazing couple of paragraphs at the end of this where this is really summed up very very well. But it actually it hints towards neo-colonialism as we see it today, because
Yep.
neocolonialism is a it's kind of a strange thing. It's kind of like an enigma where countries are on paper free, but in reality
Mm.
completely
Oh
subservient
yes.
to these imperialist colonial powers. And yeah, Ireland. I mean, if you look at Ireland, if you look at the high streets of Ireland, high shopping districts, look at Grafton Street in Dublin. Look at every fucking building on Grafton Street, which is like the high street. You know, like it's the center of commerce.
Hmm.
Every fucking
Yeah.
building on that street is owned by British capitalists. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
what the fuck kind of freedom is that where everything's owned by the British? You know, we're like an independent, free republic of Ireland, but we're not fucking free because we're under capitalism. We're under capitalist imperialism. And you can see that
Yep.
everywhere. You know, we talk about neo-colonialism. Look at that all over Africa. You know,
Oh
Ireland is
yeah.
Ireland is like a petri dish for colonialism all
Hmm.
over the world and neo-colonialism all over the world. You know, so you can
Yeah.
see this everywhere. I mean, even though France might not on paper own Algeria
Hmm.
or any of the other 13, 14 African countries anymore,
Yep.
it still basically owns them through other means, through economic means, through
Oh
the
yeah.
process of neocolonialism, through the post-colonial taxes, and so on and so forth. Same with Britain, I
Oh
should
yeah.
say Britain, not necessarily just England, but Britain and the British
Right.
imperialists, the British capitalist imperialists, basically still own Ireland, and we're still neo-colonized and semi-colonized, and of course the 6 counties are still fully, really colonized in the most explicit and overt way possible. We're still occupied by the state forces of Britain in every sense imaginable: military, police, everything.
Yep.
So, Chucky our law, freedom
Hell
to
yeah.
Ireland.
Yep.
One day we will have our 32 county Socialist Republic of Ireland, but that is not
Yep.
today. We do not have that yet. The fight and struggle must go on. So
Yep.
keep on fighting, comrades.
Absolutely.
We'll get there. Join the Connolly Youth Movement, by the way. If you're in Ireland, join the Connolly Youth Movement. Fucking base to sell.
Oh yeah.
Come here to me.
Hell fucking yeah.
Hell fucking yeah. Did you want to say anything more with regard to critique of developmental states without falling into ultra leftism or imperialism, or critiquing the drive for economic growth without becoming anti-technology or like Luddites, or
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
argument about keeping the global South poor? Did you want to say anything more on this kind of world systems theory idea and concept before we sort of wrap things up and finish up and do shout outs and all that kind of stuff?
No, I think we covered that ground pretty well. So I think we're doing good.
Based. All right, great. We're only 2.5 hours in.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty
And
good.
I'm impressed that we actually got through that.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I thought we'd kind of we'd be struggling, you know, every time we do one of these streams, I think, how are we gonna get to like 1 hour? How are we gonna get to 2 hours?
Right.
2.5 hours in,
Never
okay.
an issue.
Oh shit. 2.5 hours in, we gotta fucking finish.
Oh,
My wife
one
fell
thing.
asleep.
I am seeing a couple of people mention in the chat
Good
Human
questions.
Development Index. It's okay if I cover that real quick.
Please, yes, do please.
All right. So the Human Development Index is partially okay, but has a few significant flaws to it. The most important flaw that it has is that a part of the Human Development Index is actually GDP and GDP per capita. And as we previously discussed, that is something that isn't even on the radar of what we should want as a measure. It's mostly about just raw productive capacity, which goes into like how well you can just shove material out for war. But like there are ways in which it can have some usefulness. So things such as it does give more focus on education and life expectancy and all of that, which is better and closer. And there is a version of the Human Development Index called the Inequality Adjusted Human Development Index, which tries to capture the fact that within countries you have these differences in who's really getting it. In some countries, it's bigger differences than others. For instance, the US is a great example. We have like massive differences in a lot of these outcomes. So, Human Development Index at best is just sort of vaguely a starting point, but it's definitely not a finish point.
How can we improve it?
Oh, and it has nothing to do with environmentalism or like any sort of improved governance structures.
How do you think we could potentially improve that?
Well, I'd probably start with taking out the GDP figures, and then I would say that there should be things that are added in, perhaps some forms of survey data, but also including breaking down some of the health measures into things such as addiction levels and mental health issues. And then you also want to have sort of degrees of pollution that are being there. So ideally, you do that by tracking pollution not where things are produced, because that's a sneaky way that you can show yourself as a quote-unquote green country. But like all the pollution that's added up in your country's consumption. So I buy like a car that's made in Mexico, the factory pollution in Mexico is counted towards what my country's actually producing for pollution. And these things are ways that you can start getting better at that.
Fantastic. Thank you, comrades. I appreciate that. All right. Brilliant.
Sure.
Listen, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the really fantastic answers you've given to everything this evening. You've done a fantastic job. I mean, we're going for, you know, we're closer to 3 hours than that, and you've done an amazing job so far. I really appreciate that, Comrade Surplus Cornbread. Before we fully finish up and before we do shout outs to the comrades in the chat, and by the way, if you want a shout out in the chat, go ahead and do a little 07 now. That's 07. Pop that in the chat and I will shout out your name. And thank you for your participation. But listen, I want to say thank you very much for coming on this evening, this afternoon, I think, probably on your end. I really appreciate it. And before we finish up, would you like to do any, let's say, final thoughts, any shout outs or plugs to anything at all, whether that's asking people to follow you on Twitter or to follow PSL doing this or that or the other, and any final words that you have? I think now is the time to let loose and to have fun with it.
Sure thing. Well, I think I'm going to give folks a little bit of homework or further reading for themselves past this.
Amazing.
So if you want to start understanding even deeper, like all this stuff that we've been talking about with the world system and developmentalism and all that great stuff, then few books I'd recommend. You A relatively quick one by Emanuel Wallerstein himself is World Systems Analysis and Introduction. It's a quick one, has a good sort of intro. Maybe have some questions about some of its origins of capitalism stuff, but beyond that, it's great. Then also, I mentioned earlier, Ming-Ki Lee's China in the 21st Century Crisis. There's a lot of interesting information there about the effects of China's rise on the world system that we only very briefly touched on. And that's fine, because it's good to get that in some written form. And it was mentioned earlier, if you haven't read David Graeber's Data History, that's just a fantastic book.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love that book so much.
Oh, yeah, absolutely great. And then, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at surplus Cornbread. I wound up having to end at the E and putting a 1 at the end.
Don't worry. The link's in the description box below for anybody who wants to check that out. So don't worry about it. Just go ahead and check that below at the description box. You'll find a link to our comrade's Twitter account, and you can follow our comrade there. And I'm sure, if you have any questions, you can probably tweet at them. Is that okay with you?
Oh yeah, please.
Cool.
Tweet at me anything you want to know, and I'll give you my best answer. If I can't answer it, then I'll just say I'm dumb. There we go.
No, sorry, Derek. I am fucking dumb. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But here we are.
Yeah,
here we are, trying our best as proletarians within this very challenging world. By the way, I see Hakeem is in the chat there. How are you, Hakeem? It's good to see you, comrade. Fantastic to have you here.
Comrade Hakeem, you kick ass.
Absolutely. Holy shit, did you see Hakeem's stream with Vosh recently? Did you see that?
Oh, I haven't got a chance to watch that yet.
That was crazy.
Mostly because I avoid Vosh like the plague. But
no, me too. I was like, oh, fucking Vosh, it's gonna be shit. Then I watched it with Hakeem, and I was like, what? Vosh based? Holy fuck!
Okay, I might have to check that out.
Hakeem got Vosh to admit that social democracy relies on the exploitation of the global south. It was wild.
And that is why you don't fuck with Hakeem.
No, never. And
you come for the kid you best not miss.
Exactly. And it was never ever hostile. It wasn't a debate. They weren't in any way butting heads with each other. It was never yes, but it was always yes and. Always yes and.
Yeah.
The whole way through. It was so I think well, I don't want to say like equal sides gained a lot from it and everybody won and it benefited everybody. I mean, it did actually in different ways, but like
that's the dream.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the dream right there.
That's the dream. Like Hakeem did such an amazing job of like being a teacher for Vosh without like being inflammatory or starting fights or getting into tankies versus anarchides or sock downs or whatever the fuck it might be, or all that stupid shit, Yeah, Hakeem killed it. It was so good. Everybody go ahead and check that out. It was absolutely amazing. Everybody should go ahead and check that out in their spare time. It's actually worth listening to. And honestly, I was hugely impressed by Hakeem, but I was also and I say this. It's strange. I was actually pretty impressed by Vosh. I have to say that's
great.
Weird thing to say, but I was actually genuinely I was pretty impressed. He was pretty mature about the whole thing. He wasn't like a dickhead he wasn't the dickhead that I had previously expected him to be. He was actually pretty cool about the whole thing. So check that out.
Never said about somebody exceeding expectations. That's cool.
Exactly, yeah. Exactly. So listen, comrade, I really really appreciate you coming on. It was absolutely brilliant. Just before we finish up, would you mind telling people? Let's say there's a viewer who is living
Sure.
in the United States, and
Ah, yes.
they're like, "Whoa, that was amazing! I really really appreciated what Surplus Cornbread said." And
Mhm.
I want to do the communisms now. What can I do?
Yeah.
Where do I go? Where do I
Right.
start? So, if you were such a comrade,
Hmm.
what would you recommend that they do? And this is this is an opportunity for you to plug the organization, for
Yes.
you to
Well,
do this kind of
first
thing.
and foremost. First and foremost, I of course am a member of the PSL, and I've really appreciated and loved the work that my comrades do.
Mm,
Uh, and the number one thing I would say is that when you're getting involved, find people you trust.
yes.
That is so fundamental. You know what? Uh, I'd love it if everybody found a PSL branch that they trust in their area. If you do, great, go for it, do it. But as long as you're doing good, principled work with people who are good comrades, that's what's important. So I'm
Mm.
going to plug find good comrades, and you can find the comrades I typically work with at psl.org. So there you go.
Extremely based comrades. If you're in the US, go ahead and check out psl.org, and I'm sure you won't be disappointed. So thank you very much, comrade. It's been absolutely brilliant. You've been a fantastic guest. It's been really great talking to you. um
Absolutely.
are you just do you have any kind of you don't do videos, you don't have like your own YouTube channel, you don't have like a podcast, you
Nah,
don't you
not.
no,
This is just my Twitter account is
just a
pretty much my
Twitter.
thing.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, then comrades in the chat, people who are watching this, go ahead and check out our comrade on Twitter. It's Surplus Cornbreads. That's the name, but there's a slightly different Twitter handle which you'll find in the description box below. And please, please, please do follow our comrade. Do get in touch. He's absolutely great, as you've seen this evening. He's absolutely brilliant. And comrade, I
Oh, thank
really
you.
thank you so much for coming on. It's been absolutely brilliant. It's been amazing for me. It's helped me so much to blow off steam after a long day of
Oh.
disappointment with my video recording. Got my nice plant
Yep.
here. I got this nice plant behind me, and I spent all day recording videos. And the zoom function on my camera fucked up, so none of them are usable. So
Oh,
after
yes.
all, and by the way, and it's not only just the video. By the way, I recorded audio separately using this little microphone that I'm using right now. You can probably see the edge of it there. It's a little Rode
Yeah,
USB
yeah.
microphone, and I recorded that and mixed it as well. For every one of those takes, I recorded and mixed the audio. So I adjusted like the compression. I adjusted like I did like the noise reduction, but like I did like all this stuff, and it took me like all day. And then the camera was just like, "Fuck you, pal. Get the fuck out of here. You're gonna have to record all this again. Get the fuck out, you piece of shit. You have to go back to the drawing board. Try again on Friday." So that's
Oh,
me.
yep.
That it was a shitty day. I'm pissed off. I spent all day recording this shit. I put my plant behind me. That's
Yep.
the big plant. I'm sorry, Surplus, you can't see this, but there's a tiny little plant behind me as well. Some comrades might see this little plant. I got a cup. I got a cup on top of the bookshelf there. I worked hard on this shit. I took photographs to see what worked. I checked the fucking feng shui of the room, motherfucker. It was an
uh,
intense day. So it was
so
kind of
proud to see you
intense.
wrecking.
And the thing is, this conversation cheered me up, so I really appreciate it. It educated me, it enlightened me, and it
Fantastic.
lightened my mood as well. It helps make everything a little bit cooler. after everything that happened. So listen, come here to me. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much, comrade. And to anybody who's curious, who wants to get involved in the communist movement and the socialist movement in their area, go ahead and check out their local PSL branch. And we have comrades as well, by the way, from the CYM, the Connolly Youth Movement, which is the organisation that I'm involved with in Ireland, who have moved over to the United States and who have joined the PSL. So, you know, if people do find themselves like agreeing with the kind of political positions that I am espousing on this channel, then you'll find yourself right at home in the PSL. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and check that out in your own time. I think you'll find it very useful and very fruitful as a Marxist, Leninist, and all that good stuff. So thank you, comrade. I'll do a quick shout out to our comrades in the chat before we fully finish up. So let me do this here, Surplus. If you'll hang on for a moment, Socialist Swan. I'm not sure if you checked out Socialist Swan. By the way, Socialist Swan is an amazing YouTube channel which you should check out. There's a lot of fantastic videos about the GDR, the German Democratic Republic, East Germany, for people who may not be sure what that is. Socialist Swan, 07, Ben Totes, Papi Chulo, Elisto, You'll Have a Stroke Reading This, Jamie McIntosh, Seamus McMullen, Hakeem, Champ, Hakeem, extremely based to have Hakeem here, Sydney Rika, Ben Totes, That's Not a Fact, let me see, a lot of the same people send the same messages, Rumaizo, RUMAIZIO, I'll have a stroke reading this, David Lee, The Noble Sufferer, Seamus McMullen, Sydney Rika, Ben Totes. Let me see if I can find anyone new here. It's the same comrades, Papi Chulo. It's just the same comrades looping for the rest of it. I see D Toads Run. D Toads Run. You know, I always feel whenever I read like any German, I'm always like, did you watch Simpsons when you were growing up, comrade? Can I ask you that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know that situation where it's like die, Bart, die.
Yep. The
Bart. Nobody who speaks German could be a bad guy.
That's good, because like that's been one of the things I've been spending quarantine doing, trying to learn German.
Who wouldn't?
And I will say to any German speakers out there,
Auf Wiedersehen.
I hate your German gender system. Otherwise, the language is fine.
Yeah, it's a base language.
Like gender still drive me nuts.
There's 3 genders and but there's like this whole system and oh my god, what a mess. I can't.
And it's like, okay, to be fair, no, I hate 2 things. I hate that you have the gender system, and I hate that that's your substitute for having a nice, consistent plural system. Just have an S at the end. You do it for some words.
Easy.
Love my German comrades.
Absolutely. I apologize to our German comrades who are reeling at this, who are unsubscribing from the channel right now. But yeah, please make the language easier for us plebs to learn. Come here to me. I see Surplus Cornbread in the chat.
I got a little bit in there, so shout me out. Yeah.
Surplus Cornbread, shout out to you, but also I don't know, is that someone who has taken over your account? Have you been hacked? No, man. Okay. System Machine. Thank you very much, comrade. I think System Machine's from the 6 counties up the north.
Mm-hmm.
Solidarity 07 to you, comrades. Who else can I see there? Sydney Rika, Socialist Swan, Papi Chulo, The Noble Sufferer, Ben Toth from his okay, that's it. I think that's the majority of our comrades for Revolution International. Thank you very much, comrade. We will, by the way, do that call-in show at some stage with Ugopnik. We will be inviting viewers in to join the Google Hangouts to chat with us and actually jump on the microphones and talk with us audio wise, not just in text. And that'll be a lot of fun. That's gonna happen pretty soon, so check that out. Stay tuned for that, and that's gonna happen probably, I don't know if it's gonna happen this month. Definitely before March, so definitely in January or February. But Yeah, I probably can't be more precise than that. So yeah, anyway, listen, thank you very much, comrades. I really appreciate it. 0707s in the chats, solidarity, red salutes, and thank you very much. I really appreciate you sticking around. I hope you've enjoyed the stream. I hope you found it useful. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your week, comrades. Agus slán go fóill. Comrade, do you have any closing words that you want to say before we go off the air?
Just thanks for having me on. This chat's been fantastic. Look, I've loved your channel for a while now, Paul. So great chance to get to talk to you.
Oh, thanks very much, comrade. That's extremely kind of you to say, and overly generous, I would say, because most of what I do here is
I'm
just
being overly modest here. You're fantastic.
most of what I do here is just getting drunk and talking shite. So thank you, comrades. And, enjoy the
As
rest
if
of your
that doesn't make it better. Like, come on.
Listen, comrade, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, and we'll definitely do this again sometime. All the best.
Hell yeah.
Anytime you want to talk, just give us a buzz, drop us a little direct message on Twitter, and we'll organize one of these for the future, and we'll make it happen. And yeah, come here to me. Thanks very much. Thank you so much. All the best. Yep. Have a lovely week. Have a lovely week to all the comrades in the chats. And yeah, I will see you. For people who are curious when the next stream's happening, it's happening on Friday. We've got Mel Brewer from the Protein Podcast, also from Coffee with Comrades, coming on Friday. That'll be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about anti-capitalist media, podcasts, working in magazines, journalism in the 21st century. It's going to be a lot of fun. Obviously, we're going to be getting extremely drunk. That's what we do here.
Nice.
And yeah, that's what we get drunk and we talk communism. So thank you, comrades. I will see you all on Friday. Cheers, comrades. Have a good one. Agus slán go fóill. Bye, everyone. Take care.